Good morning to all of you. Wish you a very happy Sunday morning. I'm Aditya Tikku, the founder convener for GCTC. I, on the behalf of GCTC, would like to welcome you all to the GCTC Manthan, a series virtual brainstorming session where we generally discuss about and deliberate on the various issues related to the counterterrorism, security, and strategy. Today at GCTC Manthan, we will be discussing about the India's defense preparedness, prospects and challenges in a post-COVID world. So GCTC basically believes that in order for India to become a regional and gradually a global power, we have to be ready to counter any threat, internal or external. In order to do so, we have to ensure our armed forces are provided with state-of-the-art infrastructure and training. Hence, today GCTC brings together on the same platform security experts, industry leaders, policy stakeholders to decide the future of India's defense modernization. I welcome you all once again. First of all, I would like to welcome our key speaker, Dr. Ajay Kumar. A warm welcome, sir. Well, Dr. Ajay Kumar needs no introduction. He is the current Defense Secretary.
Thank you very much, Aditya.
Right, sir.
So would you want me to speak now?
Sir, just a moment, sir.
Okay.
Right, sir. So we have Dr. Ajay Kumar, a 1985 batch Indian Administrative Service Officer of the Kerala cadre. He is the current Union Defense Secretary of India. Dr. Kumar has served in various posts in both the Government of India and the Government of Kerala, such as Principal Secretary, Information Technology, Managing Director of the Kerala State Electronics Development Corporation, Secretary Industries, MD of the Kerala State Cooperative Agriculture and Rural Development Bank, amongst others. Dr. Kumar had earlier served as the Union Defense Production Secretary too. Warm welcome, sir, again. We welcome G. Mohan Kumar, sir, a 1979 batch IS officer of Orissa cadre. He is the Defense Secretary of India from 2015 to 2017. He has also served as the Defense Secretary of Production and as the Steel Secretary of India. G. Mohan Kumar served in the various key positions, for instance, Union Defense Secretary, Union Defense Production, to name a few. Warm welcome, sir. We have amongst us Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha. Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha is a former three-star admiral of the Indian Navy. He commanded 2 Sea Harriers squadrons as well as Air Station Hansa. Admiral Sinha has commanded the first Saryu class petrol vessel, INS Saryu. Well, he's basically on the board of the GCTC also, and he has also served as CNC Western Naval Command, and he was the Chief of Integrated Defense Staff. Warm welcome, sir.
Thank you.
We have amongst us Dr. Deepak Kumar Hota, the Chairman and Managing Director for BEML. Presently, Deepak Kumar Hota is the CMD of BEML. Mr. Hota previously held the position of CEO Biofuels at HPCL. Dr. Hota was awarded the prestigious World HRD Congress Award with CEO HR Orientation Award from ET Now. Warm welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
We have amongst us Air Marshal Ramesh Rai. Air Marshal Ramesh Rai served in the Indian Air Force for 38 years and served as an AOC in Sea Training Command. He has been with GCTC since inception as an Executive Council member for GCTC. Warm welcome, sir.
Thank you.
We have again a dynamic personality, T.S. Raju, former Chairman and Managing Director for Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. He is the first member secretary of Design Development Management Board, established by the Ministry of Defense. He was actively involved in the research and development programs for the light combat aircraft, the HAL Tejas, HAL HTT-40. Warm welcome, sir, again. We have with us Wing Commander Rajesh Dhingra. Wing Commander Rajesh Dhingra is the CEO Reliance Defence Limited and Chairman National Council on Defence and Aerospace at ASSOCHAM. At present, he is leading the defence and aerospace business, including the setting up the first smart defence city in the India. Warm welcome again, sir. Tanmoy Chakravarti, the Group Government Affairs Officer, Tata Sons. He was appointed as a Group Government Affairs Officer in March 2018. He works closely with the Tata Sons and the Tata companies in government to help support business and identify opportunities as well as for the government stakeholder outreach. Warm welcome, sir.
Thank you, Aditya.
We have amongst us Ashish Saraf. He is the head of the Airbus helicopters. He will be joining us very shortly. And currently he head of the helicopters business for Airbus India and South Asia. Warm welcome. Looking forward. Then we have Jagmohan Singh, the Regional Director India, Sri Lanka and Maldives, Lockheed Martin. He has vast experience related to procurement of Indian defense and security solutions, strategy formulation, program execution, and customer relationship. He has held the post of Senior Director Business Development, Lockheed Martin. Warm welcome, sir.
Thank you, Aditya.
Well, to moderate this kind of heavyweight session, we have amongst us the session moderator for today, General Satish Dua. General Satish Dua has served as the former Chief of Integrated Defense Staff. He has held the staff appointments including the Chief of Integrated Defense Staff, Colonel MS, Military Secretary Branch, Brigade Major of the Kargil Brigade, Brigade General Staff of 16 Corps. And during his career, he has been awarded the VSM, Sena Medal, UISM, PVSM. He's a member of the Executive Council of GCTC. Warm welcome, sir, and thank you all once again. Now, I would request the moderator to kindly take it from here. General Dua, over to you.
Thank you, Aditya. Good morning to everybody and a very warm welcome. It's really nice to see several old associates, some mentors, and specifically a very special welcome to Dr. Ajay Kumar. It's a pleasure to see you again on this. We've been working together for a long time, and very looking forward to. And I would also like to mention the former Defense Secretary, Mr. Mohan, with whom one I had the pleasure of serving earlier as well, and several other names. I'll not go into that detail. One has been serving with the heads of a couple of DPSUs. I've been learning from Admiral Shekhar Sinha and so many other present over here. A very warm welcome to all of you. Looking forward to a very good session. Before I defer to Dr. Ajay Kumar to make his a little keynote address, I will like to, as after that, I will give a little gist, and I will like to then speak on a couple of issues which some speakers in particular, I will request them to touch upon that in their intervention. We'll have everyone talking for about 5 to 7 minutes, because so that we get enough time for a discussion after that and the question answer session. Dr. Ajay, before I hand over to you, may I request you to touch upon a couple of things. I'm sure you must be planning to do that, but some things, the new DPP, the new edition of DPP lays out some differences, key differences. I'm sure we all know it, but if there is anything that you wish to sort of emphasize on that. And the only other thing I would like to request you is to somehow to tell us, we work together on this, and you have been taking a lot of steps on incentivizing or encouraging the private sector participation in defense industries. So broadly, where are we on that? generally all of us know what the steps have been taken, but where are we on that? And if you can throw some light on that as well. Thank you very much. With those opening remarks, over to you, Dr. Ajay. We request you to please give your opening remarks. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, General Dua. It's a pleasure to see you again, and of course, a very, very high-powered panel. A lot of friends in the panel as well. Shri Mohan Kumar, Tanmoy, and many others. Aditya, thank you for having me here today morning. I think what General Dua has actually made my task easy. I will talk about DPP and I will talk about industry, because both of these things are something which are current and are happening. But I would also like to touch upon something which is possibly, as Tanmay would know, is something which is very dear to my heart for a very, very long time. And that's, I think, possibly today is the single most, when we are talking of modernization of armed forces, it is a single most important factor which would and should influence the modernization route that we adopt in the country. In this regard, we see that there is increasing role of technology all over. Let me give a few examples of how technology is shaping the modern warfare. The modern warfare, as we all are seeing today, every day we are seeing it, is different from what it used to be, 25 years back, 40 years back, and definitely very different from what the World War II type of scenario which used to happen then. First of all, I would like to say how artificial intelligence is shaping the war. With increased use of artificial intelligence, more and more autonomous weapons are today coming into existence, are being deployed. Man is working in conjunction with the machine, and today the level of precision is something which is becoming much higher than what it used to be. If we look at the recent past, most of the successful attacks that have happened, whether it is the January attack on Qasem Soleimani in Iran, whether it is the Saudi oil installation attack, there is a series of successful drone attacks which were done largely by machines, where human intervention was only to the extent of how to use this machine effectively to target, to reach the target, get the target. And as a result, today it is also possible to achieve the results wherein, because of the high degree of precision, it is possible to reduce collateral damages to a large extent. As a result, some of our traditional measures of interception are today not so effective. What technology was used for intercepting missiles is no more available because of the size and the height at which drones fly. And it has made it very, very difficult, as the drone technology is advancing rapidly with longer duration, longer distances, and more lethal payload capabilities. And with greater autonomy, these drones are today able to. Today, I don't know, but I think over 20 countries today already have drones. But the other feature of this technology is also that even apart from militaries of the world, other organizations, groups which are in militant activity can also have easy access for these technologies. The democratization of this technology has made it possible for large number of groups who were otherwise not able to access advanced military technologies are also able to access this technology. And to that extent, the fear of being suspect from attack is not only for countries but also from such groups. The second and very important aspect which I would like to talk about, which is relating to how social media is shaping the modern warfare. I mean, we have all heard that how American presidential elections were majorly impacted because of the manipulation of the social media in that country. It is, I would like to mention that one of the famous saying on warfare is that if you can figure out how to shatter rival spirit, and then you might win the war while avoiding the enemy entirely. Social, earlier it was not possible. All times militaries have been trying to shatter the morale and the motivation of the rival and militaries, but it's very difficult to do so in the previous regime. Today, what has happened is social media has enabled you to access not only the militaries but even the population of those countries. And the last 4 or 5 years of developments have shown that increasingly social media is used to do warfare in multiple ways. Social media allows you to access other countries' people, influence their minds, influence their ability to about particular point of views, and by doing so you can actually drain not only the people's own thinking, but you can also drain the enemy's military spirit and make it more and more difficult for them to succeed. It is in this context, today if you see, a lot of countries have developed social media armies, if I may say so. Without naming any countries, there are on record that today social media is used as a weapon to achieve end goals. But it's very interesting. It's not only the established the countries and the militaries that are using social media. Am I audible? And because I can't see the screen, Aditya, am I audible?
Very clearly.
Yeah,
So very
thank you.
clearly, sir.
I'm fine then. Thank you. So, but we also see that, for example, very conservative organizations like ISIS has been using social media very effectively to achieve their goals. And just to mention, I came across this very interesting line which says that media weapons can actually be more potent than atomic bombs. And this is what ISIS has to say in its propaganda pamphlet. Now, this is the kind of powers that today social media is influencing. People are using chat box, robots, etc., to create social media, to create fake information. And unfortunately, as it happens, fake news like junk food, somehow people have much greater propensity to consume fake or junk news, which has been created to sensationalize or to stimulate you negatively than they have for good new healthy good positive news. And this therefore has become something which catches the imagination of the people in a very big way. The third point which I wanted to make in terms of how the modern warfare is changing is about intelligence. Today, more than ever before, truth is not hidden and cannot be hidden. It is now there in the open, and someone in the world knows what is happening. When the Malaysian Airlines flight 17 was shot down over Ukraine, and there was dispute and there was arguments and counter arguments whether it was the Ukrainians or who did it. Investigative journalism, which investigative journalism firm called Bellingcat, which led by a British journalist, actually found out that this was done. In fact, they gave a report which was as specific as saying that the missile that shot down MH17 is from 53rd Anti-Aircraft Missile Brigade from Kursk in the Russian Federation. Extent of who shot the missile, which brigade shot the missile, and this was all evidenced with photographs, images, videos, and actually the missile launcher which was used was also photographed seconds or minutes after the actual missile launch took place. Now, Bellingcat had no access to any intelligence other than open source intelligence. And amount of information, they just kept on mining information from what was available on the web, on the internet, in open domains, in reports, etc., and were able to clearly establish how this missile was fired. One of the most well-guarded operations of our times, the killing of Osama bin Laden, was live tweeted by a software journalist in Abbottabad. And this was done, remember, it was an accident. He was a software engineer who was working in his home, and he heard a helicopter, and he said, it's strange that you hear a helicopter in the middle of night at 1 a.m. in Abbottabad, a place which doesn't hear helicopters very often. And then he also live tweeted saying there are gunshots and something is happening, whether it is Taliban who's doing this, etc., etc. And next day morning, when the news broke out, he came to know that what he was doing was actually live tweeting the operations of 26 of the Osama bin Laden operation, which was being carried out by the Americans. The question is that this operation took place in 2011 in Abbottabad. With the kind of internet penetration that existed then and the kind of usage of technology today, which is like more or less universal in some ways, it is extremely difficult to see that anything and everything that is happening is beyond the eyes, ears, and some of the machines of today. So therefore, today it's extremely difficult to keep any information totally under wraps, and we must expect that a lot of this will come out in the open domain. In fact, today increasingly most human intelligence is supplemented or is supported by open source intelligence by all militaries in the world, and the importance of this has to increase, and technologies and ways of using this open source intelligence has to continuously evolve. Fourth point I would like to make is with respect to the use of space. We are today seeing increasing use of space, whether it is for command, control, communication, monitoring, early warning systems, navigation, etc. And today, there are international efforts to slow down the pace of space militarization or weaponization. But this is something which is already happening with more and more countries acquiring capabilities to use space for one or the other way. And we would continue to see this trend grow in the coming future. And therefore, it has significant implications of how we prepare for the future. Right now, I mean, we are going through COVID, and while we do not know the cause of this, but this itself, in case this also puts pointers that if people are going to be using biological warfare, how much of economic and damage that you can do to a country possibly could not have been achieved through much other ways. So basically what I've been saying is that in this new kind of warfare, this is not to say that the traditional wars will not happen, but the new war, we have to prepare for the modern warfare, which we see happening all the time. This modern warfare is silent, it's ongoing, it has huge destructive effect, as much or more than conventional war. and attributability is limited. And in that context, we have to be prepared to how to deal with this new technological warfare that is upon us. If technology is the key to the modern warfare, no matter what, and I have intentionally skipped some of the more conventional form of technological development, including network-centric warfare and other forms of warfare, which are all electronic warfare, etc., because these are also important. But I thought what is today being used more commonly and most commonly, we will have to address those issues as well. So the dependence on technology becomes imperative, and how the countries have access to these technologies will be best equipped to be able to tackle this. And to be able to do so, I think we need to develop our own technological capability. And to develop our technological capability, we need to leverage on our strengths. We have our DRDO and we have our DPSUs and OFB. I think these need to now even become more relevant and important as far as creating our own technologies. The pace of technological development in each of these organizations needs to be faster than ever before. As far as DPSUs and OFB are concerned, they were envisaged or have largely been functioning as production agencies. I think because they have been engaged in production to such a large extent, time has come where they have to now graduate from being merely production agencies to using their expertise and the huge resource base that they have to be able to create technologies in their own spheres. And I must say that there has been significant progress in both these regards. DRDO has today started working more and more in new technological areas. They have ambitious plans in these areas. DPSUs and OFB have launched onto a massive drive for technological development, as was reflected in the efforts to file more IPs by them. I remember in 2018-19, they filed about 730 IPs, and I don't know the number for 2019-20, but I think equally large number must have been filed in 2019-20, but for the last month or so when COVID took its toll. This effort of leveraging our existing base to develop technology is one part of our effort. The second part is to be able to develop our industry, which you mentioned. I think we have very powerful industry which needs to be leveraged. First of all, in this regard, given the fact that new technologies software is so centric to all the new technologies that are developing, I think we should be able to leverage the fact that we are very strong. The software industry is very strong in this country. We have, I mean, I don't want to get into specific, but we have one of the strongest software industries in the world. We are servicing the world in terms of both products and services as far as software is concerned. And leveraging on that, capabilities can be developed to leverage in the new technological areas. The other thing is using industry it's not only in software, but in other areas also industry has a lot to offer. And this I say with my experience under Make 2, which was started about 2 years back, and 44 projects came up in less than about a year by the industry for technologies which were not available in the Make 2 are all cases where technologies are to be developed and designed in the country. And 44 new technologies at no cost to the government were offered. And I think there are large number of cases where this technological development can be taken forward. The third thing we haven't done so far as much possibly is leverage our universities base of academia. Somehow, except few exceptions here and there, most of the academic research has not been related to defense. We see now IIT Madras, we see some work happening, IIT Kanpur, some work happening, but largely we do not see a big effort from the industry. In fact, none of the courses that are being carried out in the industry, in the IITs or other engineering colleges, relate to defense technologies. And I'm aware that a lot of our friends keep going to universities abroad for such courses, for the lack of such courses being here. I think universities need to be roped in a much bigger way going forward, so that what I'm talking really is a whole of country effort and not merely effort of one or two organizations to be able to create technological self-reliance. Lastly, I would like to talk about startups, because we have one of the most vibrant startup ecosystem in the country, which has yielded us great dividends. And our own experience in defense and has been equally good. Again, we had done several challenges with startups, and there have been cases, where startups have developed technologies at fraction of the cost. The maximum assistance to any startup that is given under the IJEC program is about 1.5 crore maximum. Many of them get less than that, and in timelines which are like 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, new technologies, have been come up and made ready, which are today on offer for government. The good thing about all of this is that the scale at which these things can be done is much larger. You can have hundreds of startups working on a problem, and there could be one or two winners. You can have hundreds of industries working on a problem, and you could have one or two winners which are at par with it. The current model of licensing and production, I think, needs to change dramatically in this regard. Apart from this, I think the other key area is in which we will need to have a concerted, and where government also needs to play an active role, is in terms of core technological areas where I think we are lacking in terms of expertise. And these are three such areas that I would like to mention. One is in terms of engines, all kind of engines that drive the platforms, whether it is aero engines for ships, or for landed ground-based platforms. Second is advanced materials which are used for making these platforms. We have significant capability in large number of materials, but I think this material technology is closely linked to our ability to develop our own products, because a lot of materials which are used in foreign platforms, they are not willing to share with us their own material technology. And so even when we do have the ability to make that material in a particular composition, we are not able to get that certified, and therefore not able to use it. And there are some other points I would, from sake of time, I would stop. But lastly, the other point General Dua mentioned, I would like to briefly touch upon. So the DPP amendment that is today, the draft of which is now in public domain. First of all, I would request GCTC and all the distinguished, very knowledgeable members here who are on the GCTC panel and listeners, please do give our inputs. I would like to say that we are trying to make some changes which will have significant improvement on our present system. So we are open to a lot of ideas and inception, and please do not treat this draft as a final document. We are looking for ideas, and we would welcome any suggestions in this regard. Having said that, I would like to mention that this, based on the discussions that we have had with the services, with DRDO, with ministry and other relevant stakeholders, we have made several firsts in this DPP. For example, today, to encourage domestic software industry, it has been made that if a software which is embedded in a platform can be made in India, then it will necessarily be form part of it, as part of it, that the software shall be developed in India by an Indian industry. Similarly, for startups, there is a procurement procedure which is embedded in the DPP, so that when startups, because one of the lacuna was that even when startups came up with technology, there was no way by which these technologies could be adopted. Third suggestion is that there is provision for doing, in cases where there is absolute necessity for buying, we are introducing provision where the foreign OEMs can actually be can be invited to see if he is willing to make as with controlling stakes, whether he can make that product in India rather than actually having to buy it outright from outside. Fourth session on material side, again, we have provided that materials technology should invariably, wherever feasible, should be sourced from India. Wherever Indian industry is capable of making those materials, it should be sourced from India, and the certification of that material should necessarily be part of the transfer of technology, so that in future also the materials can continue to be sourced from or prepared in the country. There is, for the first time, the leasing thing for non-critical platforms. As you know, one of the biggest challenges that we do face is resources. So, to be able to stagger the resources for equipment and platform which are not of critical nature, which are not used on which are used for support activities like transport aircraft or training aircraft. These could be leased on performance basis, so that we can be able to pay them based on how the servicing performance is there. So like that, there are a large number of changes in DPP which have been proposed, but this document is out in the open seeking comments. So once again, I would invite everyone to give their comments. Thank you. I've taken a little more than what time was allotted to me, but I thought this was an opportunity to share the views. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ajay Kumar, for that very interesting intervention. No time was allotted to you. Let me clarify. That is for the rest of them. The moderator will be very strict if need be. For you, we wanted you to give opening remarks. I only asked you to cover those 2 points in addition to whatever else you have, and you did that beautifully. Thank you very much. We're really happy that you were here to give a very authoritative point of view. And one has noted your suggestions. I'm sure we'll discuss them by and by. We have 1 or 2 questions already for you, but we'll leave that for the end. Let everyone have a chance. So all those couple of questions that are there, please, we'll take them in later. Before I ask others to come in, let me, in the manner of speaking, set a cat or two amongst the pigeons. Our constraint, budgetary constraint, is our constraint. We know we have to live with it. There are different ways of doing it. Leasing is one thing that Dr. Ajay just mentioned, and so on and so forth. However, it's also our issues are also our production capacities. Our issues are also technology gaps, R&D, which some of them he also touched upon. So, do we continue the same way as we have been doing so far? That is the moot point. Or do we do anything slightly differently? So, like I said, to set the cat among pigeons, in our modernization, I'm going to throw a few pointers. We've had an please bear with my remark. We have had an over-reliance on public sector because there was no defense industry earlier, a private sector earlier. When we gained independence, DPS did a good job. But is there a way of doing it differently? How do we address the technology gaps? Dr. Ajay also mentioned that we can have some productions or co-productions or joint ventures, license production inside our country, which would also then, improve our technology base, our production capacities, and actually some of the business houses could export what is manufactured in India. That's another thing that is very interesting. Also, how about enhanced role of private sector? We, let's do away with nomination culture. We have private industry, which is now and has been for quite some time fully capable. It has great capacities. Whatever it does not have, it has very good best practices where it can bring in from outside, whether it's technology or investment. We have the strategic partnership and other things going on, Make in India from the other side. But have we made enough progress? Do we need to do it in a little differently? For private sector participation to really pay results, show results, sorry, we will require a outreach from the government side, hand-holding, service involvement is very essential. So private sector on one hand, how about the DPSUs and the ordnance factories? I request, as far as private sector is concerned, I'll request Mr. Tanmoy Chatterjee to please dwell on this in addition to whatever else he has. Throw up some suggestions, please, sir. We look forward to hearing that from you. On the other hand, the DPSUs, the public sector, that is also including ordnance factories here. We have Mr. Raju here with us. We have Mr. Hota. So we'll request you also to talk about certain ways of enhancing the efficiencies of our DPSUs. We started off with the corporatization of ordnance factories. Where are we and what can be done to speed that up? Look into that. I also have let me just throw this in between as a matter of discussion. As far as the private sector is concerned, now we have two Secretary Defense Productions over here. Dr. Ajay Kumar was Secretary Defense Production. We have Mr. Mohan Kumar, former Defense Secretary, also was Secretary Defense Production. Sir, I would like you, if you can, to focus on enhancing the efficiencies in DPSUs. I would like to just say one thing, and I've been saying that often in articles or even on social media. If space can be a success story in our country, why not aviation? My own another point, we need to leverage our power of as a buyer. We in the next 10 years, we are going to buy so many aircrafts of different sizes. Our projected requirements, not only in the military, it is also in the civil. After all, an aircraft has a lot of commonalities. Civil, now of course after COVID things might change, but the earlier projections were that in the next decade we are going to buy anything between 1,200 to 1,600 aircraft, depends on which version you were reading. Figures, be that as it may, what I'm trying to point out, there is a huge figure and a very similar figure if you put all types of platforms put together, rotary wing, fixed wing, transport, fighters put together, we are looking at a figure a little under that for the military also. So with that, can't we leverage their combined power? We must be the only country. In fact, strike that. We are the only country, a developing country at that, which holds two air shows, one for the civil side and one for the military. No other country does that. We need to leverage some things together. That, now I know I'm just going away, but the fact is we are talking in relation to how we can leverage those things for enhancing our own production capacities, technology base, etc. Having said that, the last point I would like to make is on R&D. Dr. Ajay made very good points about R&D and how we must do this and how DRDO is doing some things, brought out some cases. My point is, I think we need to democratize R&D. I think you also implied that. The division of responsibility between the DRDO and private sector should be made. The bigger core technologies maybe DRDO works on. We must decide what they should work on and what private sector can work on. Now, I know private sector participation in R&D is rather less compared to other countries because we can't assure them order. There are other issues. and we'll request Dr. Tanmoy to dwell on that if we can. But the last point that I wish to make on this is better incentives can be given to private sector in terms of incentives in capital financing, and so many other things can be given for them to step into it, because it is, my belief is that they can get better global practices. They also look at the dual use technology involving of academia. Dr. Ajay also mentioned, and we need a lot is happening, especially IIT Madras. I've seen that defense incubating center there. A lot is happening, but much more needs to be done. The last point, the last point is the partnership, the services partnership or user involvement. I think more of user involvement is required, and I'd like to have comments from Dr. Raju on this. As HAL, we require more and more user participation. The Navy model of user participation in building of ships is far better than the Air Force, as a user, their involvement in aircraft production. So, with that, I will like to now request everybody first, all those who are not speaking, please switch off your microphones so that there is no disturbance. Please, may I request even the panelists or speakers, if you switch off your microphones now, it will be better. And in case you start speaking and you forget by mistake, everybody will remind you, you can still hear. So with that, may I request our former Defense Secretary, Mohan Kumar, to please give his remarks. And sir, I request you to stay for about 5 to 7 minutes so that we all can then participate later in the end. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Mohan Kumar. Is he there? Aditya, do you have someone in technical control who can check?
He is there. He is there.
All right.
Sir, your mic is on mute. Kindly unmute it, sir. I would request Mohan Kumar sir to kindly unmute your microphone, sir. Thank you.
Aditya ji, can't you do it for him?
There should be one technical person who should be able to do it, no?
Yeah, you can do it from
There is
the
an administrator who can mute and unmute everybody's mic.
I mean, he can do it from his side, but not from here. General Dua sir, maybe we can
Okay. Yeah.
second speaker.
Hello.
All right.
Yeah,
I think he just spoke. Yes, Mr. Mohan Kumar.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah, now we can hear you. Please
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Mohan Kumar.
crystal clear.
We hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, 1 minute. 1 minute. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Anyway, very good morning to all of you, and very nice to be back with my former colleagues, and especially General Dua and Ajay Kumar. And very good morning to everyone. And I just wish you a very safe and healthy existence these days, in the days of COVID. Now, the topic about modernization, of course, it's a subject matter very dear to me. We need to look at the entire modernization exercise of the armed forces in a holistic way, because we tend to look at it from the point of view of procurement from other countries. Now, this is one of the things that is always happening because of our failure to reform our system. Now we keep waiting and waiting, and it is business as usual. And ultimately, when the need arises, there is a knee-jerk reaction to buy things from abroad, and that takes away our opportunity to reform our system and then be more self-reliant. Now, if you look at even defense preparedness as an integral part of our national security, you cannot but accept the fact that the primary need is self-reliance. And if you are not able to indigenize our defense industry, so we'll be seriously compromising our national security and strategic independence. So this is necessary. So at the macro level, we need to look at the various issues which need to be addressed. First of all, of course, our production, our defense industrial base is very weak, and we need to expand the defense industrial base. But defense industrial base will not grow unless there is a sufficient infusion of technology and sufficient promotion of entrepreneurship. As you know, the defense industry is always dominated by the DPSUs and the OFB, and the systems are outdated, and they need a lot of modernization before they are able to do anything. As General Dua had mentioned earlier, we also need to leverage on our buying power. India continues to be one of the largest importers of equipment, but we are not able to really leverage on our buying power in terms of getting technology or making use of offsets in a very purposeful manner. See, as far as offset administration is concerned, from years together, I've been in defense production. I found that the administration of defense offsets is very casual. We just look at it as a means of accounting, and that too on paper. And we are not worried about the outcomes. Because offsets are so very important, because we pay for it, the nation pays for it, and it's necessary for each one of us to ensure that each offset is beneficial to the industry. Now, we have not been very successful in doing that, although we have got billions worth of offsets within us. I cannot say what has happened in the last 2-3 years, but when I left, the situation was rather dismal. Now, the necessity to promote the utilization of offsets in a big way, so that the domestic industry absorbs technology and thus contributes it might to the general defense industry in the country. Now, we also don't have an ecosystem which promotes the private sector. Now, the private sector, as I said earlier, the DPSUs have been rather over dominant, and the dominance is not matched by the capabilities. Now, we need capabilities both not only in terms of the volume of production, but also in terms of the technological capabilities. We need to have technology transfers. But we find that wherever we have taken up licensed production, we have miserably failed to absorb the technology. Now, if this continues, there is absolutely no use in having licensed production. Another very important factor for the public sector units is that they have failed to nurture an ecosystem around them, which can actually lead to advances in technology and advances in defense production. See, the private sector will benefit only if and when the public sector does hand-holding. Many of the public sector undertakings are not doing the job of integrators. They have to integrate by nurturing a production system wherein MSMEs play a large part. They also source technologies. They bring in. They have their own partnership, but they have contracts with the main producer. We simply have not been able to lay down this system in this country. And unless we do this, the public sector will not be able to contribute substantially to the defense production of the country. And they themselves will be doing only their own existential issues, they will be without looking into the larger issue of defense production within the country. The other point I want to emphasize at the macro level is, of course, see, the Ministry of Defense also has to undergo reforms as far as the procurement process is concerned. No, there was a lot of efforts made in the past to evolve some recommendations for drastic reformation in the procurement system. Because why that is required, I'll try to explain briefly. It is necessary to reform the procurement system with a view to making the Defense Ministry an agent of progress and also an agent for working with the private sector. What's happening is that the DPSUs have an overwhelming presence, and the system hesitates to work with the private sector. Now, you need to have a system, procurement system, wherein the industry is proactively nurtured by the Ministry of Defense. And unless this happens, it will be difficult for the industry to take inspiration and take the lead by getting orders from the ministry. And even when orders are given, it's necessary for the Defense Ministry to work proactively with the industry to see that the progress is achieved in the desired direction. So the macro level reforms are absolutely a must before we get into the system of the micro issues. Now, one of the good things that happened is, of course, there is a system, there's an institution which has been set up by the Ministry of Defense, that is the Defense Innovation Organization, which is capable of promoting innovation in the defense sector among the private sector. Now, the private sector has to, there are so many efforts being made by small industries, MSMEs and other agencies, but they do not find an outlet for proving the worth of their products. And this has to be provided by an innovation system which nurtures such industries, such innovators, so that, and defense is an area where the private sector will have to play a major role. And as rightly pointed out by General Dua, see, even in research and development, the entire system is overwhelmed by the presence of DRDO, which virtually enjoys a monopoly of defense research. And they have their hands in everything from A to Z. And this has not really contributed healthily to nurturing of a technological ecosystem. Now, what we need is, there has been a large percentage of outsourcing done to the private sector in order to promote their innovative energies and entrepreneurial energies, and to see that they become a very active and close partner to the DRDO in development. This is not happening. See, this may be happening in certain areas where it has something has happened, but it has to be a rule rather than an exception. So the sad fact is that there is no proactive effort being spared to ensure the participation of the private sector in research and development. See, in the Western countries, the advanced countries which have made progress in this direction, we always find that the private sector is rather dominant, because most of the innovative work and research and development, they do a lot in collaboration with the government, and there are licensing and intellectual property right arrangements which will make them, or even there's a legislation to see that the private sector which develops some kind of a product, they utilize it in national interest. So even there are export controls. So in fact, in India need to have an ecosystem in which these things are addressed, so that the private sector can play a very healthy role in defense research and development. Because if you avoid the private sector, we are actually avoiding a large area of talent and resource, and by doing that, it's a self-defeating exercise. So it's necessary for us to nurture the private sector in a big way before we do that. So these are some of the macro issues probably which I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kumar sir. absolutely to the point, concise, and very, very insightful points. Very great pickup. This is something where let me just highlight two major issues. I mean, you made several very good points, but public sector should act as integrators. Now that is the kind of ethos that will help us deal results, especially if you couple up the end point about how private sector must step into R&D. They should have to be given necessary incentives, made compulsory, etc. In Israel, 22% is the of the industry. 22% of the production goes into R&D. I mean, that's the kind of level of investment in R&D that they make. So we look forward to some of these being incorporated in times to come, because there is no running away from the fact that we will not be able to make good progress unless we leverage our private sector and that as a resource, like you rightly said. Thank you very much once again. May I now request Admiral Shekhar Sinha, sir, to please make your comments. You've been handling this very closely. Over to you, sir, and request please keep the time in mind so that everyone else can speak. Others, once again, before he starts, please switch off your mics. We'll be able to hear each other much better. Switch off your mics, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Aditya-ji. I'm quite humbled to be sharing this platform with very distinguished speakers. Thank you, Defense Secretary Dr. Ajay, for your perception on the tools of modern warfare. It's a big change that a serving Defense Secretary is coming on a panel. It wasn't seen till I left service in 2014, so that's a good change. While you have emphasized more on the non-contact warfare, little on the contact warfare, let me get the context back to modernization of the Indian Armed Forces post the COVID-19. Now it has become a virtually routine for all the strategic community to name these, these sessions as prospects and challenges, and all these dialogues you find this happening. One of the reasons I feel is that we haven't progressed the way we should have is that our whole country and the civil population has never suffered direct impact except for their people who are in the armed forces. It has always been a war between the two armed forces and not the civil world. Whereas if you see the advanced countries of the world, the people many civilians have died. The whole country has been bombed. And this is one of the reasons that why we don't get it right. We don't have a political aim. We don't have a political end state. What we have is a very classified document, and it is always reflects the older warfare. Do we have to establish as per the assessment of the present? But what we are looking at is post-COVID, and therefore we have to talk about future, and therefore we have to leapfrog like we did in the IT industry. I'm not going to talk about what weapon systems we should be buying. But it makes a very pitiable to state that 60% or 63% of our weapon systems are imported. That's because we possibly are not thinking about tomorrow and day after's war. We are thinking about today's war. And COVID has given us one big reason to think about the future warfare. And it was mentioned about bioweapons by a Defense Secretary in his keynote address. And I'm glad that he's looking at the future warfare. It doesn't matter if you have signed, the big agreements that we will not use chemical weapons, we will not use bioweapons, but people have it. Tomorrow, our armed forces are going to get decapacitated.
Shekhar Sinha, sir, your mic is on mute, please. Kindly unmute it, sir. Yeah, better.
You haven't heard it all right from beginning?
No, we have heard just like 10 seconds. 10 seconds. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I come back to thanking the Defense Secretary, Dr. Ajay, for his perception. And I'm glad that the serving Defense Secretary has taken a sort of open forum. It wasn't so a few years back when I left about 2014. And also the nomenclature as modernization prospects and challenges. This has become a very routine headline for most of our discussions. One of the reasons why we haven't progressed the way we should have is because our civilian population has not been involved in any warfare. It has been between two militaries. Militaries lose their lives, and whereas other countries, you see, wherever the development has taken place, the entire country has been at war. The civil areas have been bombed, and a lot of people have lost their lives. And that is one of the reasons that the perception, our strategic mind has been a little bit, because finally the money has to come from the government. People who are sitting in state of, the seat of power, they are the ones who have to realize. And therefore, I'm happy to see the Defense Secretary here. Firstly, the warfare has got to have a political aim, and it has got to have a political end state. So what do we want as an end state post-COVID? That is number one. Because now we have seen possibly a bio-weapon being used, which the Defense Secretary mentioned about, in spite of the fact that there are treaties which prohibits the use of bioweapons and chemical weapons. That is one thing. So we have to start doing research of tomorrow, day after's warfare now. And regrettably, the DRDO in the present form it's not happening. In fact, the way when we did the analysis, we realized that only 30% of the whole money spent on DRDO in the year 2012 was being spent what was needed by the armed forces. So there was a lot of reforms being done. And I think one of the former Director Generals or SA2RM, he had done a board in which he had suggested the DARPA model, which was summarily rejected by the DRDO. And, it's a project base where private sector and the government sector of researchers, they come together and then do the research of the future weapon systems. And thereafter, they keep the industry associated, private, DPSU, everybody. So that is a model. I feel that for a future warfare, it is necessary. So bioweapons, a lot of mention was made by artificial intelligence, cyber and space. But let us not forget that for India, the warfare will be a mix of contact and non-contact warfare. You cannot wish away your western neighbor, you cannot wish away your northern neighbor, and you cannot wish away the kind of warfare that your neighbor is doing. So a lot is dependent on the contact warfare, and therefore the contact weapons will be important to manufacture, important to develop. Whereas non-contact warfare will be more in the maritime domain, which is now coming to the forefront, and the geopolitics in which China and Pakistan are so closely linked that one will provide the future warfare techniques, and one will do the contact warfare as a proxy to China, which is our western neighbor. So we have to be preparing for those. Unfortunately, we are still long distance away, and because particularly in the aerospace industry, you see, we have not manufactured anything worthwhile in the aerospace industry. Air Marshal Ramesh Rai is here, and I'm sure he will vouch, because of little bit non-involvement of the service, and therefore now the Air Force has woken up very much in the last about 4, 5, 6 years, and they have got deeply involved. But you will find the aerospace part of any three service, Army, Navy, Air Force, everything is virtually imported or a licensed production. So that is one area that I would believe that we have to do this. Developing the ecosystem right now, this is the good time, since it is post-COVID, that a lot of countries are exiting their production lines from China, and India is one of the destinations, and I wish that even 30% of those, we develop the ecosystem, we get the private sector now to tie up with these countries and start manufacturing the supply chain items. And that is what the first offset document that we had produced, which General Dua will vouch, that we had said that let's not look at making big platforms straight away. You have to make the components first, and only then you will find, because we have fallen back in technology part. Industrial revolution, we were a sort of colony. The Britishers never gave you the advantages of industrial revolution. So to assume that you will get niche technology by your own development and research, I'm sorry, it will not happen, because technology has cost. I will stop here because I think I have finished my 5 minutes. Rather, I have taken 8 minutes. So thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take on questions later.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for very to the point comments, very incisive, and thank you especially for sticking to the time. That was very interesting that you mentioned about the DAPA model that committee had recommended, and that was not really accepted. I think also in the vein that Mr. G. Mohan Kumar, the previous former defense secretary, also mentioned, we need reformations, not marginal thinking. If we are going to just have some marginal thinking, one more provision introduced, one more way of doing it better, so I have another thing, those things are okay for a day-to-day tactical thing. But we need reformations, and you also hit the nail on the head by talking about the DARPA model. We need to move in a different manner if we have to move ahead. And I'm actually waiting to really hear from the industry side. But moving ahead now, let me call on Mr. Deepak Hota, MD BEML, Chairman and MD BEML. Thank you very much for being over here and being on this panel. Just like we spoke about Dr. Ajay Kumar being here, thank you also for being here, and give us an authoritative version of your intervention. Over to you, Mr. Hota.
Thank you very much, General Dua, and it was an inspiration to hear Dr. Ajay Kumar. He brought in a different dimension of perceptions, social media, some of which we have never thought of. Thank you, Mohan Kumar ji, for bringing in, what the DPSUs in particular and how we need to integrate with the private sector. Having said that, I just want to take a minute to say what kind of a BEML, what kind of a company BEML is. We are not people who get salaries from the Consolidated Fund of India. We have to make our own profits. And about 3-4 years back, there was a time when we ran into problems on profitability. And at the moment, of course, we are making profits. In the last 3 years, we have moved away from something like 60% open competition business to about 90% open competition business, which means we do not get it on a nomination basis. We have to fight and we compete against the best in the world. And these best in the case of mining and metro is there for all to see. In the metro space, we are a leader in India, about 50% market share. Having said that, I just want to say that there's a huge amount of capacity that a company like BEML, which was formed long back, earlier, of course, the PSU was the way to go, but we have come a long way. We have a lot of capacity going begging in our factories at KGF, Mysore, Palagat, engine factory. We have a full-fledged engine factory, and we can easily complement the production that is being done by OFB. And that is something that we need to look at. Now, obviously, the case for modernization is huge. But I think the most important thing is the modernization and the reframing of our mental models and mindsets. Somewhere along the line, there is an unwritten kind of acceptance that whatever is from outside is good. We have experienced it in the case of metros. Again, I'll give that example because that is very close to my heart. Now, when we try to, indigenize something, there is a kind of a vested interest of the multinational companies to see that the conditions are such that we cannot indigenize it. For example, if there is a software, the TCMS, which is the heart of the metro, the source codes are not given. As a result, we are trying to work on all this and indigenize all of them. My request is that this is the time that private sector and public sector, there's a huge amount of capacity going begging. So the private sector needs to align with the public sector and vice versa. But there needs to be a level playing field. There are issues of payment that we don't get. The private sector people get payment on LC. There's a huge amount of money that the government owes us, but we still have to make our ends meet and pay salary. We still have to follow the public procurement bill, which doesn't apply to the private sector. This Make in India has been something, the Honorable Prime Minister's dream, which I think has really helped. we have been able to churn out a lot of Make in India products, even in the defense sector. Now, what are the key platforms that we need to look at? The UAVs, the FRCV, the AI-based, what Dr. Ajay Kumar mentioned, artificial intelligence-based, and thanks to his intervention last year, I remember, we had achieved 140% of all the patents that we had to file. Even last year, we filed about 70 patents, and just a week back, we were honored with one patent. We have exported to over 68 countries, but somewhere I would like to admit, and it's a matter of shame perhaps, we may have exported to 68 countries, but when I see what BEML was in the years in the past, it is not anymore. So we need to reinvent ourselves. Now, in the process of reinventing, we need to have access to technology. Now, we may have been selling 60% of all our products with our own homegrown R&D, but I would say that that is not going to hold us in good stead in the future. We need to align with DRDO, which we are in limited ways. We need to partner with private sector, which we are in many ways. We have a lot of private sector partners with which we are doing work. Now, what are the strategic issues? I think the note mentioned about the strategic issues of procurement. Critical technologies are never shared, and these are exorbitantly priced. The spares is the way to control, and the foreign partner ensures that we buy spares at very obscene prices. There are also issues of sovereignty. Now, if you want to use some platform and your adversary has it, then you have a problem. Now, what are the remedial risk and mitigation measures? I think the G2G procurement at the aggregate level, if we can get the TOT and we can partner, get in the private sector, get in DRDO, and even the OFB has huge manufacturing capacities. But I would say any organization, even like the railways, if you have a very big organization, the unions become very powerful. I think that is something that we have to be mindful of. The point I'm trying to allude is, do not, for heaven's sake, create monopolies. Don't have one very big company so that you run into trouble. As far as the indigenization is concerned, the note says whether it is warranted and whether it is necessary. I would say it is very much necessary. As I mentioned about the spares, as I mentioned about the upgradation of equipment cannot be done unless you have the technology. Indian design is very important. Now, in the case of metro, again, I will give you the example where every metro corporation tries to come out with a new design. We have been telling them that please have a standard design. These exotic features are not something a country like India can afford. So we would have a design and we should stick to it so that individual capacity within the country develops. Indian design is very important, as was said earlier. I don't think any additional facilities need to be set up. But what's important is we need to upgrade and improve our R&D setup. R&D is something we cannot spend money if we don't have money. So that's where we get lost somewhere. And recently, there's been a lot of talk about Chinese flight of capital, flight of investment from there to India. By the way, we were talking to some companies in the space of urban transportation where we are leaders. And when I was talking to the one multinational CEO, he said that, look, countries like Cambodia, Vietnam, they have a plus 20% advantage in terms of the labor laws, in terms of supply chain, in terms of electricity stability, etc., etc. So we need to be very mindful of that. If we have to really attract the investment, we have to make it very lucrative. And like I know L&T for a matter has set up a huge facility in Hazira. Now they are saying, what do we do with that facility? Now that we have already experienced in KGF. We had made the first main battle tank and that was productionized by HVF. But today our facilities are going a-begging. My engine factory in Mysore is going a-begging. So the limited point I want to make and end on here is that the time has come for us to collaborate with the private sector. There is no public sector, there is no private sector. And by the way, you all must be aware that DML is supposed to be disinvested and privatized, but that is happening for the last 3 years. Can you imagine what it does to the morale of the people? For 3 years, the government has not been able to disinvest. However, in these 3 years, we have still turned out our profits and we've been managed to make both ends meet. I will end on that note, and if there are any questions, I'll be very happy to answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hota. Very, very to the point and very good points made by you. And thank you. A big thanks for also sticking to the time. You made some very good points. I'll just take the last one first. This thing about huge production capacities going up again. Yes, not only your own thing, you pointed out other concerns, including ordnance factories. Yes, we do have huge production capacities. And if we are not able to utilize them, I think this is the time, taking Mr. Mohan's thing of reformations, we must get the private sector to step in, because there is a great potential there waiting to happen, waiting to be exploited. And I think for that we do need reformation. You know, you spoke another, I'll just take one more issue. You spoke about aligning with the DRDO in R&D. This alignment is something that we really need to do. Your point is very well taken. We can extend it further, and Mr. Raju will be speaking later. And now, before Air Marshal Rai takes on, I would say let me an example that comes to my mind on this aligning of R&D. There is a GTRE, there is HAL, and there is ADA. There are others, but I mean these are the main three big players. GTRE is developing an engine. We have HAL also developing an engine. Now that we don't really, Mr. Raju can shed light on it. Do we require a smaller engine of that kind of kilonewtons, etc.? I am not a technical man, but you know, alignment of R&D is what you said. Rather than having overlaps, why don't we do things together? All right. With that, I'll hand over to Air Marshal Rai, sir. We look forward to your intervention. Same rules, please, sir. 5 to 7 minutes so that we all can participate. Thank you. Rest again, please switch off your mics, all those who don't need them.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all the speakers for bringing out many relevant points, and particularly reflecting towards the Air Force. So I, in my discourse, will restrict my comments to the air domain, and I want to divide in two parts. So one is, where are we right now, particularly in Air Force terms, because it becomes very important for the security and defense of this country. And secondly, I would see what we need in the future in terms of technology, because 21st century is going to be defined by technology, if nothing more. And first, let me say that a future war is going to be a multi-domain war. A multi-domain war will need a multi-domain response. Earlier, if one domain could, say, excel in its application, it could probably take care of the other domain's vulnerabilities, but it's not going to happen in the future. Each domain will have to be assertive and will have to win its part of the war. Likewise, the air domain. So from here, I just want to switch for a minute to tell you where the air domain is in air power terms. We are right now at 30 squadrons, and that also of the 4 Gen or below. Where is our adversary? Even Pakistan has a technological edge over us. They have the F-16, version, AMRAAM-C 120C with a 100-kilometer range. And that is the advantage they got in February 27 when they made a retaliatory strike. China, on the other hand, has 1,700 aircraft, going to be 80 squadrons, all of at least 1,000 of the 4 Gen or beyond. So what is the kind of threat that we face, and where do we stand? So the 30 squadrons of the Indian air power are going to face 28 on one side and 80 on the other. Is that feasible? Is that making us feasible to dominate ourselves in the air domain? To my mind, it's not possible. And furthermore, if we divide them into theaters as we are contemplating them to be. So the first and foremost aspect of modernizing the air power, modernizing the Air Force, is to build up the numbers that we want for ourselves, because that threat is immediate. And this building up of the numbers, whatever.
Air Marshal Rai, your mic is on mute again. Just kindly unmute it. Air Marshal Rai.
I'm back again.
Yeah.
How much was-
not back.
So can I continue from where I left?
Yes,
Or?
yes,
Yes,
please.
sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So we have to get going in the air domain. We have to build up the numbers, whatever model we follow, whether we involve involve HAL or we involve the private industry. We have to get the numbers going. That's point number one. Now coming to the multi-domain connect. If, like I said, multi-domain is the way to go. For a multi-domain war to be fought together, to be fought collectively, we need a multi-domain connect. And that connect will come through the net-centric route. Pakistan Air Force fights a net-centric war today. Likewise, the Chinese are going on to a net-centric war because they're competing with the United States. And they are going to fight the war in the digital space. They are going to have where collectively they bring to bear the entities upon us. It is time for us to make this as one of the trajectories for future development, that we as all the 4 domains or 5 domains fight a net-centric war, and particularly combine the cyber and air domain, because this together can make a lot of effect and compensate for our deficiencies. The next aspect that I want to say is that we have to build ourselves a UAV force. India is embarrassingly behind in this aspect. Even Pakistan has a indigenous UAV which is armed, and China is exporting their built UAVs to the world all around. But somehow we have not got onto this aspect. While we've gone to space, we've also built the LCA, but the UAV, we can't get the better of it for reasons best known to the industry. But that is one field where in the air domain we will need to confront autonomous aerial weapons, which will, with the help of artificial intelligence, identify the target and engage the target on its own. The next trajectory, which I think is of 5th generation platforms, because our adversary in the north is already inducting 5th generation platforms, and they will be stealthy, they will be well equipped, they will outrange us, they will outmaneuver us, and we will once again land into difficulty. So 5th generation platforms is what we need to head for in whichever model that we follow. And another point is that of a 5th generation war construct, the construct of the war will be that of 5th generation in a digitized manner, where the whole battle space is digitized, and we have to find our own digitization methods. So this is the way I think the air domain should go. This is where the armed forces should go in a multi-domain manner, because the future war will be both of the kinetic and non-kinetic mix. It is not going to be a war where there is certainty in the kind of threat. It will be a mix of kinetic and non-kinetic. And the future winning side will be the side which adapts to this configuration at the fastest, at the earliest, and in a smarter way and better than the enemy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rai. That was very well covered. And, there are several important points you made, but if I just was to pick 2, I mean, last one about there is no getting away from future technologies or, 5th generation, as you said, so we need to produce there. But the first point that you made is also very relevant, perhaps in the present scenario more so, because you said there is no getting away from making up the numbers. You pointed out very correctly how we are stacked or how we are not very well stacked. So there I want to throw a poser to you, and it's a good thing that up next will be Mr. Raju, who has a lot of experience with HAL. So the question that I wish to make, again, I've been in the team of we thought of setting a cat amongst pigeons. So my question to you is,
Sir?
Sorry? Someone want to say something? Okay. The point that I wish to make is how, again, in the view, in the ethos of reformation that Mr. Mohan mentioned, China has been adopting somewhat this kind of an approach, if not model. You take an indigenous aircraft, not necessarily the top of the rack in the world. Because if Air Force or Army or Navy is asked to buy something, we want to buy the most contemporary in the world, which is understandable. But sir, if the government, or if it's told to you, take Tejas, take the LCA as it is. Of course, you have ordered LCA and we are work in progress, but take ownership. Air Force takes the ownership of producing better and better models, of doing product improvement as we go along. And should we look at that kind of a model also in terms of stacking up numbers? I know technologies as you want, can we do better in our own way? But I'll come back to, if I've not expressed myself well, the ownership of product improvement should lie with Air Force. If Air Chief is made responsible to coordinate these 2 or 3 things, we need a better user interface. I have been repeating, apart from other things that we need to follow as to why space is doing well and why not aviation. You yourself mentioned about UAV. Very well, sir. If you want to say anything on that, please. There's a food for thought in the end. And we'll request Mr. Raju now. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Very good morning to all of you. The last 20 months, I think my blood pressure was absolutely normal, right from 915. I think it puts me back to 4 years, back into the chair-like system. Yeah, it's been quite a topic which has been on cards for many years. And it is quite interesting that my first visit, when we saw a technology transfer for a Jaguar fighter in 1986, I remember the words what the OEMs, about 45 of them, 20 in UK and 25 in France, have told me how they treated me. I still very well remember. Even after 40 years, when we come down to the new technological era, even today, the OEMs are treating you like that. Like the CMD Bell stated that, or other earlier speakers are saying that, when you bring in a software, you don't get a software source code. It's something where India develops and supplies everywhere, but then the foreigner doesn't believe that we have such capabilities. But leaving that aside, of course, as coming to the topic that the primary, modernizing Indian defense prospects and challenges. I mean, I know much of the veterans and men in uniform know better what they need to do it. But for me, as a common man, it's only the muzzle which speaks of yourself onto your nation. That how well you are equipped, that much you are respected, and that much you are strategically positioned in your domain. So, in short words, it's imperative that we have to modernize our defense. It should note that the technological advances occurring at asymmetric pace at regional and global level. In the current digital world, the first requirement, as for me, that we should need to collect the information, maybe through your network system, sensors, AWACS, whatever means we have onto it, integrate it through, and we need to have a central repository wherein application of the artificial intelligence, as stated by Honorable Secretary Defense, and other means, and create our position strong onto it. Reliance on data, of course, is more critical now in the current situation. At the same time, it also brings in us the vulnerabilities. Getting back to my comfortable zone of air power, due to its ability to respond rapidly to the emerging challenges, will play an increasing and important role in this national security. As stated by DefSec, war fighting is not solely limited to military capability, but covers the entire spectrum of national capability, including its strategic leverage and economic prowess. The technological advances will make the unmanned aerial system, as Marshal Roy is saying, that more capable and can operate across the entire spectrum of conflicts. Not coming straight onto the prospects, what we are looking onto it, I'm looking at the pandemic has brought to the fore the overarching requirements of self-reliance as a nation. Technology is going to play an increasingly dominant role in the new normal, which we're going to face later. Post-COVID pandemic, due to the budgetary constraints, indigenous products and platforms would get priority over the products from abroad. As Ministry of Defense has set up an aspirational target of doubling the defense production from 1,80,000 crores in the next 5 years, which is estimated to reach about 90,000 crores in financial year 2020. The aerospace and defense manufacturing sector has been identified as one of the most prominent sector under Make in India initiative to realize 5 trillion economy by 2024. Further, the DDP explicitly seeks to achieve an annual export turnover of 35,000 crores by 2025, boosting defense exports, increase private participation. The MOD has reserved some of the contracts for the private players. It has already granted more than 70 defense manufacturing license to the private players. And as the strategic partnership policy, MOD may sign contracts with Indian firms and some of the critical systems and platforms. This provides an opportunity for the new entrants in the niche technologies to play a significant role and take over the dominant position. Opportunity to convert the programs, products which have been developed indigenously by DRDO, HAL, DPSUs and private sectors which have reached their initial operation stage can get trial orders or limited series orders from the Indian industry. Arms export will help increase the competitiveness and flexibility of the domestic industry, and that will obviously get reflected in the over-design, the build capacity of this country. However, coming to the challenges, as General asked me to talk about the DPSU's production capabilities, technology gaps, and the user participation in the product development, and how does the private sector participation would increase, and further the R&D. So I've just come out of my prepared notes for the talk. First and foremost thing, I mean, we've been listening this, all the experts who are sitting here, it's not the first time you're listening to this talk on modernization, private participation, defense, public sectors, efficiencies, inefficiencies, government policies and procedures, all are being read. So one of the example is the general asked with that, why an aerospace could be success, I mean, space is success, why not an aerospace? So maybe if you look back, there is a space commission headed by a secretary level and the chairman of the ISRO. A similar thing was tried to establish the aerospace commission, I think from last 10 years. I was the third time formed committee secretary in 2015 or 14 to form the aerospace commission again. And that time it was told, we wanted the Prime Minister to be in the chair, and I was told at that time, please, Prime Minister has too many things to do, leave him, please have your defense minister, and come to the defense minister said, have your defense secretary production as the chair. That's the state, let it be. We have been talking it, many reference papers, notes, all would be there, but somehow, I mean, it's everybody knows what is required. But the prioritization goes not by the executive, it is the political will which looks at what to be prioritized, what to be given. So that's one point when we compare to the space to aerospace, there is a distinction, there is a history for last 10 years. Coming to the DPSU's production capacities, efficiencies, capabilities, I've been in the DPSUs for the 40 years, from mostly in the aviation sector, HAL, which is supposed to be the number 34 in a ranking of the world in 2018. I'm sure that would be having a better position now. Here, we have 17 licensed products in HAL, whereas there are only 14 indigenous products. When you bring in a licensed product, the capacities are established for that product. If you want to take an example of Sukhoi 30, now we have 200 odd manufactured in various phases. The whole of the capacity is established is dedicated to the Sukhoi 30. 30. Now, how much that would be useful for Rafale is a question. But the prioritisation goes not by the executive, it is the political will which looks at what to be prioritized, what to be given. So that's one point when we compare to the space to aerospace, there is a distinction, there is a history for last 10 years. Coming to the DPSU's production capacities, efficiencies, capabilities, except the general facilities which are established. So in DPSUs, predominantly the capacities are established over a product. The moment product production is over, the only services would be required. That too in aviation, as Marshal Roy would know, that we need to keep these facilities for 30, 40 years, like Jaguars, which are there in 1983, we need to keep it till 2020. So these are the specific facilities which are dedicated. So how much you can use it is a question, unless very less commonality would be there in different products. And you coming to the technology gap, as far as what is given when you are bringing in a technology from abroad, what is given, and to the extent the indigenization or the per value is would always around the 50% of the product value which is happening onto it. So the DPSUs operate under given a procedure and formulas which are given by the government, where the owner directs the companies to do how to behave, and they behave onto it. While expectations are many, but of course that is the limitation which exists onto it. Next to the user participation, it's a Navy participation you said, but then if you're looking at the IAF, LCA for that matter, there is a team which is sitting at Bangalore. Am I audible? General, are you saying something?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please, please.
So the
please go ahead. Sorry.
IAF, pardon?
No, nothing. Please go ahead. Sorry.
The IAF has a team headed by an Air Marshal or Air Vice Marshal at HL with 20-odd senior officers to coordinate and complement the efforts of ADA and HL. And in every product, like helicopters which are produced by HL, there is a project management team which has, if the Army is getting the ALH and then the Army team is participate, Air Force will participate. They have a say in the specification. Once the SOP is frozen and as it is developed in the selection of the product, whatever it is in a global product also, the teams would participate. The unanimous selection would happen among the user, the developer, and the advisors. So that is the kind of a participation where they are there into it, but somehow we need to see if anything better, more practical things would need to be seen. So coming directly to the private sector participation. An industry is created by somebody. The bottom line is that if it is a patriotism, then you have to look at the government and the DPSUs. If you're looking at a private sector, he has to make money for living. In defense, the numbers are limited. Your efforts are long. Your gestation period happens in years, and you're not sure of the order quantity. You're not sure of your sustaining the business for long. Hence, while yeah, there is a lot of opportunity when you multiply 100 billion acquisition. India is the third largest importer of the defense equipment. Multiplied by 50% or a 30% of offset, it would be about 15, 20, 50 billion. There's a lot of pie, private sector to jump in. This is practically, unless there is a business case, I don't think anybody at the private or public, the public sector which are now listed, would have any meaningful unless they start earning onto it. Yes, I'm coming the last point onto it. The only thing which need to change on the post-COVID is, as I expect that this would give a chance for the indigenous products platforms. First thing is that my humble request would be the user should respect and accept the indigenous products. That is the starting. The moment the indigenous product is respected and accepted, the whole scenario would change and India would be really meeting its export and the requirements of the domestic needs in the country. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raju. Very good points made. You know, the last issue that you said, yes, India should respect, we should have reformation to buy indigenous products and go product improvement, and we'll request Air Marshal Rai's comments later on that. But on the other hand, then there should also be a change. You know, PMTs cannot coordinate, Mr. Raju, these big AMOs that you have, these three, ADA, GTRE, HL. The DG Aero has to do it. The DG Aero, I was saying, should be vested in the Air Force or Air Chief. user interface by PMTs is not going to work when you have a huge platform. So we can discuss that later separately. I think Dr. Ajay Kumar is in a hurry. He has to leave in a few minutes. So I'm going to just stop this or pause this. He's already, so he is there. Especially if anyone has a question of the Defense Secretary, let's have 10 minutes on that. And I will give preference the PSUs and ordnance factories. You get enough interaction with the Defense Secretary. So private industry as the first, this thing, no retired officers, private industry. If you have a question, please make it known. I will do that. Anyone now?
This is Tanmoy Chakraborty speaking.
Yes.
Can I ask a question to the Defense Secretary?
Yes, please. Yes, welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair. A very good morning, Dr. Ajay Kumar. I just wanted to know from you that in the post-COVID scenario, are you planning to do a review of the administrative working of the entire ministry in light of what we have been hit with, not just us, but globally? And is it going to bring about a complete reorientation of the working style led by you in the Defense Ministry in terms of more, as you correctly pointed out in your morning statement, about the hyper use of technology, reducing physical contact? If I have to accumulate the physical visits of the people of the armed forces in uniform as well as civil personnel within their offices itself and accumulate this on a daily basis and multiply this into a monthly and a yearly basis, we are talking about a colossal waste of time, productivity, etc. So my question to you is that, are you going to really review and introspect and create a digital interface, touchless, travel-less, internal meeting, visit-less kind of a work environment, or is it going to be the more or less the same as we have been seeing in the past?
Is there any more question? Dr. Ajay, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. No, I had not switched on my mic. So,
all right. Wait, should I take one or more question before you answer?
Sure. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Anyone more on question? I am not going through the chat, so I want someone to please raise, because he will be leaving. So anyone who private industry specifically.
Sir, Commander Dinesh Singh from TCS, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I had a question for Dr. Ajay Kumar. We have met a few times earlier, sir, through VIF. You mentioned that our biggest strength actually is in software engineering, sir. And I heard two CMDs of BEML as well as HAL telling us the kind of dependence that they face when they import systems from outside, both in, like, say, something as mundane and metro and something like, say, in aviation side, where foreigners generally, hold on to codes, hold on to technology, hold on to everything. Now I am seeing this thing that why this thing, the same software industry, which is in India, which makes all these products for worldwide for all the best companies or something across, including for defense companies like, say, Boeing and Lockheed Martin. And I know even as TCS, we work for many of them. Why can't we utilize to kill this dependence right now? Is there something that the MOD is planning, like, say, to tell its PSUs that start involving your bigger software giants into your own to, like, say, mitigate your dependence on softwares?
Okay.
Wing Commander Dhingra.
Okay, Wing Commander Dhingra. I'll take this as the last question for the moment, and then we'll request Dr. Ajay to answer. Thereafter, we'll take more questions if there is time. Wing Commander Dhingra, please. I don't think he is there, or he's not able to listen to us.
I think am I audible?
May I ask a question?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. So, sir, this question was for the Defense Secretary. So,
Yes.
we have seen Ministry of Finance putting a 20% cut on the Q1 defense budget spending. There was a webinar earlier where Secretary Defense Finance was there, and there were again discussions about cut in defense budgets because of the current situation. Now, given that the expenses on the salaries and pensions are fixed, and which is anywhere close to 55%, and the acquisition budget being close to less than 20% of the total budget, even if we have a 25% reduction, the major part of it comes on to the new capital acquisitions. And given the committed liabilities, where do you see it going for this fiscal year and the next fiscal year? Because that is what would be important from the industry perspective, to have a visibility. One is on the budget, and second is on the programs, which now will need to be prioritized so that we can cut down on wasteful efforts and focus on what is immediate requirement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. May I request Dr. Ajay to please take on these questions, as otherwise he'll be pressed for time. If the time permitting, we can take more questions later. Over to you, Dr. Ajay.
So first of all, let me address Tanmoy's question. And, I think we are seeing increasing use of digital technologies in defense now. Defense forces have actually been using more technology than other attached offices and ministry as such. Somehow that had not been happening in the past. I can assure you now, in all wings of defense ministry, there is effort to use greater technology. In the ministry itself, we have a dedicated MOD LAN network, which is connecting every single officer in the ministry, as also with the user organizations, so that the business between the ministry and user organizations can be done through this network. A dedicated data center is being set up. All major activities in the ministry are today in the process of being digitized, whether it is land management systems. Today, as you know, we have a large, defense manages large chunk of land, and today we have a GIS-based system which enables us to use this database for various decision-making processes on various land-related issues. We are in process of initiating a cloud-based multi-tenancy application for all the 62 cantonments in the country. We are in process of introducing for all the SANIC schools a common cloud-based, again, multi-tenancy application for all the SANIC schools and other school establishments in the ministry, which were attached to the ministry. BRO, Coast Guard, MES, all these organizations are already in process of using technologies. Offset portal in defense production has been made online, and I'm sure as industry users, those who are making their offset applications know that today the whole offset process has been digitized. So going forward, I think we will use the NOC applications which are made to the ministry for doing various things like aerial survey or power projects or various other allied permissions for undersea petroleum, oil resource explorations, etc. They have been made online, and these have all been made online, taking into account the security aspects. And we have an air-gapped network which will ensure that sensitive information is not shared on the public domain. And I think this trend will now continue to grow as we go forward, so that we will see a lot more digitization going forward. And this is still, these are the first steps, and in future much more needs to be done and will continue to be done. On the issue of, Mr. Dinesh Singh raises, how can we use software industry? I think that's a very, very important point, and I think I've had this discussion with several industry leaders, including from NASSCOM and with other various groups who have been interacting in the past. How do we make more effective use of software industry capabilities in the country? I'm aware that today, incidentally, our software industry is doing about $1.5 to $2 billion of export in defense and aerospace domain for the various global companies. And of course, for our own internal requirements, that amount would be a fraction of this. Some things which HAL or BL source, that would be a major chunk of it. Something DML may also be sourcing. So what we have to be able to use this more in a structured manner in the new DPP, what we are trying to say is that every time an RFI is done, industry can suggest that what are the capabilities of software that exists in the country. And based on the assessment of the industry capabilities, that would necessarily be as part of the procurement process, we mandated that this will be sourced from the industry. But I think this is one step. Going forward, I think it is very important that we learn to develop, because most of the software capabilities are in the private sector, in the private industry. Some of them are also there in the public sector as well. We need to work together. And when I was in defense production, I had encouraged all our defense PSUs to work in areas like artificial intelligence, to partner with industry to create new soft AI products in their respective domains. So that I think we need to go beyond to be fully able to leverage the capability of software industry. We will have to develop models which will go beyond mere contracting into partnership model, so that we are able to sustain this relationship over a period, both because the problem situation keeps on evolving, as well as the solutions and their upgrades can continuously be upgraded. And since this is not something, once the expertise and knowledge that has been acquired on a particular platform by a particular set of people, whether they are in the private sector or in the public sector, it is best possible to use the same set of people to develop further more advanced solutions. So that is what I mean by partnership model. But I think we still need to go there. We are in the, what we have done, what we have proposed right now is, as you will see as you can see in the draft DPP, is this model where we are saying any capability with the industry will necessarily be sourced from India only and will not be taken from a foreign vendor. But I think we need to evolve on the partnership model. Third is the question which Mr. Dhingra mentioned about defense budgets. You see, we still need to assess what will be the impact of COVID. And I would not like to hazard a guess, but my request to industry today is, and we have not really touched that point in today's discussion so far, is that our industry, whether it is in the public sector or in the private sector, needs to recognize that industry in the sector has grown not based on domestic demand. While domestic demand is a big catalyst, but at the same time, if you look at all the major globals, if you look at the top 10 defense companies of the world, you will find that more than 75% of their product range is the value of their turnover goes for export. And I think it is today government has created a policy framework which is pro export. It supports export. And of course, we need to also create parallel systems where, because a lot of defense export is possible only in partnership with the government. Countries look for government's endorsement for buying something. But there is definitely in the government a very positive, there's a tremendous change in the last few years in how government looks at defense export. In fact, it's a 180 degrees change in that regard. And we should look at international demand. The second part is that we are, we have to, you see, today we are undertaking large number of reforms, wherein the whole effort is, as you mentioned today, a large part of our budget goes for revenue expenditure, salary, wages, pensions, other committed expenditure. How can we reduce this committed expenditure through various kind of reforms which are under discussion today? And we hope there will be bigger chunk that will be available for modernization going forward. And the third thing which I would like to say is that the cost of equipment with indigenous technology development should also come down. A lot of our costs today goes up when we buy on licensed production model. So for the same buck, we'll be able to get more value, and we'll be able to buy more stuff if we are able to develop indigenous technology. So I hope that answers partly at least the questions that were raised.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ajay. And while there are several other questions that are listed for you, but some of them you've touched in part. Some are like Rashika has asked something about specific question about modern battle tanks and all. I don't want to go there because of lack of time right now. But one question I'll request you to take if you can. Mr. Lakshman Behra from the IDSA, he wants to ask you a question. He's not written it down. Can we have him ask the question? Do you have time, sir?
Sure. Let's do that.
All right. Lakshman, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. This is absolutely delight to listen to the Defense Secretary. Sir, I had two questions, but Mr. Dhingra has asked one of my questions, so I'll limit my question to the other one. So that is, many people commented on the inefficiency of our ecosystem of the R&D or the production agencies. But in our research, what we found that, at least to me, the biggest problem is the lack of an ecosystem where all the stakeholders can work together. So here, I mean the users, they are the biggest stakeholder, but very often we found that they are reluctant participant whenever it comes to indigenous R&D or production. And we have seen that in some cases where they participated enthusiastically, the result is far better. Dhanush is the latest example, sir. So here the Army, the DGQA, the OFB, and the DRDO, they worked as a team. And in 18 months, and the product was ready, and it became a huge success. But that is not the case, sir, in many of the products. And somehow we tend to, each stakeholder tries to pull another stakeholder, and as a result, our indigenization and R&D has been not so successful. So I think previously, when you were Secretary DP at that time, some effort was made to give the users some ownership in the Make 1. But we know that Make 1 has not progressed. But I think that ownership should be given to the users so that they feel that, okay, whatever we are spending or creating on R&D or production, they should have a vital stake. So how to bring users and give them ownership in our R&D or major items for production? Thank you, sir.
I totally agree with you, Lakshman, that there is a need for close coordination. But I would not like to, like I said, my whole point is this close coordination is not merely between users and DRDO and DPSUs. I think we have to look at a whole of country approach and not really remain confined. And that is a very important part of it. As a country, our capabilities far exceed what our capabilities exist within our public sector ecosystem in the country. And that's an important point. I would like to remake that point. I thought I had made it earlier, that we need to leverage on a country's capabilities in this regard. And this requires a little departure from what we have done in the past decades, because we have largely relied on public sector and private sector, startups, industry, academia, universities. We have not brought them into our fold as much as we should and could have brought. Secondly, I also want to say that I somehow have a little bit more positive understanding of what our country can do with respect to technology. While several doubts have been raised, I have a very positive, belief in this regard. I will just mention 2-3 examples. Although one is the question of making 100 megapixel camera. This is something which had defied our country, and we had been importing it at an exorbitant price. HAL, CMD, Mr. Sarnaraju would be able to answer that better. I forget the exact price, but it runs into several crores, tens of crores. A startup in working with IIT Delhi has produced this. They took about 1.25 crores from us in 8 to 10 months. 100 megapixel camera, which was erstwhile being or still continues to be imported from Israel, is now ready to be inducted from made in India. In about 8 to 12 months, 1 crore. And the price of this camera is going to be about 1/10 of what the imported price is. I would also like to, and these are not 1 or 2 examples they can disclose, but I'll just mention what has been possible which gives us the belief that more can be done. There was a company in Hyderabad, I don't want to name companies here, who has created anti-tank guided missile at fraction of the cost under the Make 2. And of course, they have done it in a much shorter period. Of course, a lot of people who have gone from DRDO are actually employed in that company, and they have leveraged on the fact that today some of the DRDO technologies, have used those technologies to develop it. The point I'm making is collective effort between our stakeholders. I honestly believe that we can actually do much better. Now the question is, there are a few core areas where this effort will require much bigger focus. For example, engine technology I mentioned, semiconductor chip technology I mentioned. These are possibly things which require a much bigger national effort, and for these core areas, our dependence on this model may have to be supported by government in a big way. But on the components, on the subsystems, on these technological products areas, I think we can develop on the country's capability and develop these models. In this, all the stakeholders have to play their respective roles. The user. Today, I must say, and I think this will become more visible as we go forward. Today, users are very proactively supporting indigenous technologies in several fronts. Today, one of the largest acquisitions which the Air Force is doing is based on LCA, LCH, LUH. All of them are basic trainers. Also, people are awaiting for its final trial so that can be inducted. So there is far greater willingness to accept indigenous products than in the past. And I think this kind of a constructive approach will go a long way in developing our capabilities in technology. I think if you all permit, I would like to take leave. I will be overstayed a little bit. I have another place to go, so that is why I need to leave now. I would request the permission of the chair to excuse myself.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Ajay, for being here, for taking, for your interventions, and then for taking on all these questions patiently despite your busy schedule. And like several others have said, it is really a pleasure to have the serving defense, present incumbent, the serving defense secretary, to not only take on questions, air his views so frankly, and I'm sure we'll all benefit from that. You've been instrumental in setting up some new innovation example that you did, or how you and I were together when we had the first meeting in Russia, where you got in the Kalashnikovs to have the joint ventures over here. So many other things, defense corridors, and I'm sure we are going to continue to benefit from whatever steps you're taking. So I just wanted the private sector to ask you questions. They've done, because now we have a couple of them. Thank you so much, Dr. Ajay, for being with us. We will continue with this, but we'll miss your presence. Thank you once again. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good day to all of you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, moving ahead, we have a couple of more speakers now. Comes part which is pretty interesting, because now we are moving towards the private industry, and I'm really looking forward to hearing their views. So first we have Wing Commander Rajesh Dhingra, the CEO, Reliance Defense Limited. I'm sure you can. I see you. You can hear me. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, sir. I think this has been very interesting and very learning to hear all the panelists so far. The scope of the discussion is very wide. So what I'm going to do is limit myself to the industry points. So taking on the DPP first, I think the suggestion which came from the Defense Secretary, that we as a GCTC could provide our inputs, I think that's an important point for us to take, because of the knowledge base that resides at GCTC. Well, there have been similar efforts done by CII, SOCHM, PICI, where we are associated from the industry perspective. But I think it will be very useful, because none of these associations, they have got a heavy mix of the industry experience, but getting the GCTC perspective would be very useful. And I'll be very happy to share what we have done through, say, in terms of the changes which have taken place, and some of the changes that industry would like to see. So that could be one point as a starting point. The second point that I wanted to touch was the defense budget, which I partly brought up in my question. No, so there has been a kind of a lot of debate. We have also heard saying how can we leverage our position. We are the third largest spender or the fifth largest spender, depending upon how you look at the numbers. But if we see the real numbers, even if the latest CIPRI, you see a $2 trillion defense spending globally, and we are doing, when you talk in terms of defense acquisitions, at 14 billion, $15 billion. So we are literally less than 1% of the global spending. So yes, we are a large spender, but overall, if we see, our position is limited. Also, the way we do our acquisitions, take the case of Su-30s. We did it in small tranches of 40, 40, 40, building up to something close to 300 today. But if we had done a long-term planning, if it was a larger number, could we have got a better deal? Could we have done same thing with the MMRCA? So one is our leverage is relatively limited than what is generally considered to be because of our overall size in the global defense spending. And second thing is there also, because of the fractional procurements that we do, it gets further reduced. So the third thing is when we talk about defense spending, we have been at a spending cap anyway. As a percentage of GDP, our spending has been reducing year-on-year basis, coming down to 1.5% for the current fiscal year. And if there was to be a further cut, which is understandable, if you take 50%, 55%, which is going on the salaries and the pension as fixed, so even if there is a 10% reduction, it amounts to 20% reduction on or more on capital acquisition and the revenue budget. And if you take revenue budget also, which cannot absorb a 20% cut, then the proportionate increase in reduction on the acquisition becomes 4 times. So depending upon how the cut is distributed, it is going to hurt, and it is going to hurt for at least next 2 years. The third issue that I wanted to talk about here is we have talked about kind of a top level perspective. But when it comes to the industry, normally we have to focus, and CMD BML brought it out, saying on a year-on-year basis, and we have to see what is the outlook for the industry for next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, because you have to sustain the industry. You have to, at the end of the day, every month you have to pay people, you have to pay for your commitments. So a visibility in terms of orders, in terms of continuity is very important. And this is a disruptive event. Industry is supposed to be planning for a disruptive event. COVID is a global disruptive event, but we have seen many similar events on a much, much smaller scale impacting the businesses, and it's part of the industry business planning. If you see, just to dwell further on this point, in the Forbes 500 list, if you see, the average lifespan of the companies in the Forbes 500 list is reducing continuously. So which means for the period that you can stay at the top is rapidly shortening because of the disruptive technologies which are coming. More billion-dollar companies have been created in last 5 years than were created in previous 30 years. So the element of technology, and why I brought up this point is because this connects with the element of technology. And when we talk about getting in new technology, and when we talk about defense budget, I think one factor that we have to consider, which we have not talked so far, is about cutting down on the numbers. This has been a discussion which has taken place multiple times, but there has not been a move forward. So will we continue to be at a 1.5 million military, or we need to relook at that numbers in terms of sheer affordability, both in terms of salary budget and in terms of pension budget? Because two things are linked: the modernization, the new technology, the new inductions, which we need to have vis-a-vis what is the total budget going to be. The fourth point that I wanted to bring out here, purely from industry perspective, is saying so far, largely our planning has been need-based. Armed forces will give their requirements, saying this is what we need. Marshal Rai brought out the deficiencies. Admiral Sinha brought about the deficiencies. Yes, but there cannot be two variables in this equation. Either we say, okay, this is what the requirement is, and then there is going to be enough budget to support all of that. Or alternatively, we know that this is generally going to be the budget which is going to be there for the next 3 years. and we plan our requirements based on that budget so that we could prioritize. Because currently the industry, both in the public sector and the private sector, is having excess capacity, and it is across the board. There are large offset programs which have been implemented. The offset programs which have been implemented have created capabilities, but current utilization rate is maybe 25%, 30%, 40%, depending upon the sector and the industry. So same thing is there in the public sector. Mr. Raju spoke about it, Mr. Hota spoke about it. Unless we are able to use the current capabilities to the tune of 70%, 80%, keeping on investing into the new technologies. At the end of the day, the money comes from the defense budget only. Even if industry is investing, at the end of the day, that cost will be charged to the program and it will be cost to the product. So we have to think, saying, how do we optimize it? Can, as a country, we can afford to have a utilization rate of say 30%, 40% average for the current capabilities that we have. Lastly, in terms of the budget, since it is going to be an issue, we have a huge outstanding of the offsets. Offsets are paid for by the government. This money has already been paid over last 10 years in $14 billion or $15 billion worth of offsets that we have signed. The numbers vary, but then at least $10 billion worth of offsets are currently unfulfilled. If we can fast track that, that is something which creates an opportunity to create capability, and then that will help. Otherwise, the pause which will come for 2 years, 3 years, that is going to hurt the industry, that is going to hurt the capabilities, and we will be behind in the curve. So I think those were the key issues that I wanted to bring out from the industry perspective. And my last point is from the seminar perspective. When we heard Defense Secretary, and I have personally engaged with multiple predecessors, and so have the other panelists, possibly they have done more. He is the one who is more open, who is ready to listen, who is ready to change. But the fact remains, if we talk about 5-year, 10-year, 15 years perspective and saying what we have been able to achieve, we need to bring in an outcome-based approach, saying, okay, this is a year we are going to achieve this. And whenever we have a discussion, we say, okay, what was the target that we wanted to achieve in terms of set parameters? Like in the RFP, we have defined parameters on which you are supposed to perform. Similarly, I think for our defense planning also, we need to have defined parameters. And then in the discussions that we have to make it more productive, saying where do we stand on a scale of 1 to 10. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dhingra sir. That was very nice, especially the last issue. I dare say the point that you raised about trying to fast track the offset as one of the measures you said, because we are going to be in a budget setback for a couple of years because of this disruption by COVID. And so that's a very good point. I think that we could fast track and ameliorate the situation somewhat. Thank you very much for all the points that you made, sir. I think we have two more speakers. We have Mr. Tanmoy Chakravarti from Tata's, and I'm told, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Ashish is not here, Aditya told me. And do we have Mr. Jagmohan?
Yeah, we have.
He is here as per me. So
yes,
the last two speakers, if I'm not wrong, are Mr. Tanmoy and Mr. Jagmohan. So over to you, Mr. Tanmoy. Mr. Tanmoy Chakrabarti from Tata Sons.
Thank you very much, General Dua, and for the opportunity. And I must firstly compliment Aditya GCTC for organizing this Sunday morning session. I think it's a very, very good use of time, and the forthright and very frank viewpoints of the current Defense Secretary were very well received. In fact, his openness for involving industry in things going forward was indeed a very positive step, and he has been of that nature right from his days in Kerala. And my association with him goes back to his days in Kerala, from where he has been involved with many out-of-the-box pioneering kind of initiatives, through which he has meandered and come up to being Defense Secretary. And his days at the IT Secretary Ministry also, I think, clearly embeds a deep sense of technology in his day-to-day thing. So from that perspective, I must compliment GCTC for organizing this session. I also must compliment our past Defense Secretary, Mr. Mohan Kumar, who had a very frank introspection of the assessment and a very accurate assessment that he made of the situation prevailing, and from where he talked about a huge degree of reform that was required, and we unilaterally agreed to that viewpoint. And I'm sure going forward, and with the big wake-up call that we have had in the form of COVID, which is to me nothing short of a global bio-engineered kind of a warfare without even a single bullet being fired. The whole world is at up in arms to fight this menace. Will probably completely shake us up in terms of our thinking. A couple of points I would like to mention in my the time that I have from an industry perspective is, I think it is very important for the armed forces to really get engaged in the user aspirations of the next generation of induction of technology into the defense system. I think a very active involvement, not from a technological standpoint, but from an operational user specific standpoint. I think that has to really come back to the table rather than products being somehow fitted around the requirements that are supposed to be out there. It should really be the user specifications which should prevail and culminate in the creation of a solution that has to be delivered back to the armed forces. This cycle has to be reversed from the traditional approach that we've had so far, where it is essentially the manufacturers of products which have been force-fitted into the requirements or the aspirations of operational requirements of the armed forces. I think that has to very importantly come back to the table as step one. It should not be that the user should be involved only at the time of testing or certification of any defense system, but they should actually be forming and providing the inputs towards the manufacturing or the integration of a solution that has to be delivered back to the armed forces. That prioritization correction, to my mind, is absolutely imperative. And I have, in my role earlier at TCS and now with the Tata Sons, seen a very spectatorial kind of involvement of the user community in the whole process of solution deployment. That's my first observation. The second is, and many speakers have alluded to this already, is the phenomenal active participation of the private sector alongside the DPSUs. Today, if you look at the pending order books of all the DPSUs and their sole internal ability to execute to such magnitude of pending orders, I think it is beyond the wherewithal of DPSUs to execute, other than the fact that they can actively participate, partnering with the private sector to rapidly accelerate their delivery capabilities and fulfilling all the gaps that exist in their skills, technology, and even manpower skills that don't exist within the DPSU system. So rather than the traditional viewing of the private sector as being competitive to the DPSUs, time has come to put the shoulder on the wheel and think as one nation and deploy, because there are considerable backlogs of orders of all the DPSUs, and that is primarily emanating from the fact that there is a capacity constraint or a skill constraint or a capital constraint, or all of the three, in fulfilling to the needs of the defense forces. So active part, I have personally been to some, for example, some ordnance factories in Jabalpur, etc. They have fine facilities, phenomenal infrastructure, but very archaic technology and lines capability. And if there is the partnership with the private sector, a lot of new facilities at considerable cost can be avoided just by partnering with OFB and the private sector and leveraging what already exists all over the country as the second proposition. We've had some very successful public-private partnerships. For example, some of the things that together with BEL that we delivered for the Navy are or ought to be highly replicable examples of partnership between DPSUs and industry going forward. And, also in the pursuit of Make in India, these partnerships would be extremely, extremely relevant. The third point that I would like to make is that the mission of the outcome for the operations of the defense forces should be the predominant and primary goal to pursue. By that, I mean that let's say we take an example that we want to create a satellite mapping capability of not only the country within, but also our peripheral boundaries. That becomes the mission. And then everything that has to be put together and integrated in forms of technology to be able to achieve that mission should therefore be the pursuit towards the achieving of the mission. So make the goals mission oriented as to what is it that you are expecting to achieve in terms of what the defense forces requires to deliver or have them to deliver to the needs that they have. I think that becomes the primary goal of the mission. And then everything that has to be done to be able to achieve that mission then becomes integral pieces which have to be put together, accountability taken for technology, ongoing support, maintenance, etc., the whole 9 yards to be able to respond to that mission. Now, very often we have found a fair amount of piecemeal, very, very disjointed kind of missions that achieve very limited outcomes. That has been the case so far. So make large holistic goals as to what you wish to achieve and then work backwards, get all the players together who need to participate in achieving that solution outcome, and therefore that's the way to do it. The last point that I would like to make is let us also break free a lot from the traditional procurement of capital expenditure being the only route towards achievement of induction of technology. Let us look at innovation in engagement, financial engagement models to be able to achieve the same outcomes, which are therefore extremely constrained in if only we think of the traditional capital expenditure route of achieving these outcomes. Today in the world, with the advent of cloud, with the advent of PPP, with the advent of pay-as-you-use kind of engagement models of financial modeling of engagement, a lot more can be achieved on day one with very limited capital expenditure, and the government's procurement mindset has to be completely reoriented and to be open to such financial engagement modeling that is existing today in the world around us, which can then help the defense forces avail technology much faster and perhaps jump a few steps of technology than the traditional mindset of a arithmetical incremental approach of technology induction that we have seen so far in the defense forces. I think post-COVID, a huge review ought to be done of all the existing programs of upgradation of technology routes that have been planned so far, because post-COVID, some of those steps of technology might actually become meaningless. And India has the fantastic opportunity to jump a few steps of technology and come straight onto the concurrent. I mean, the Air Marshal talked about the UAV capabilities. UAV capabilities exist in the country. UAV capabilities with payload exist in the country. But the openness to be able to create a UAV used rather than procure kind of an engagement model would perhaps help an induction of a UAV squadron much faster than the traditional approach of owning everything or procuring everything, which has been the traditional mindset of procurement. So I think I will end here. There are many more points. I've been very carefully listening to the viewpoints of all the people. The last point that I would like to make is, over the decades, a tremendous amount of domain expertise has been developed in the DPSUs, which today should be unleashed beyond the cloning or the production of licensed production regime only. By that I mean that there is Dr. Ajay Kumar gave the example of a couple of people who came out of the DRDO system, joined a startup in Hyderabad and did something dramatic, which perhaps the constraining environment of the DPSUs or the DRDO did not allow them to achieve. I'm talking about this pool of domain which today exists within the DPSUs, which can be unleashed if the thinking or the traditional thought processes and mindsets in the DPSUs and DRDO organizations are broken free or are redefined. I think there's a tremendous pool of domain depth that exists today, which can be unleashed towards the achievement of national defense objectives and goals. So I think I'll end here, and I look forward to the rest of the speakers and any questions or answers that there exists. There are tremendous opportunities for Make in India. As I end this rendition, I think we have to think about so one of them in which we are involved, and we have been languishing on this thought for the last few years, is the replacement of the the AN-25s and the other HS-174A, HS-748 type of aircraft, which are today so obsolete that there is a big risk factor in everybody who flies them. There's an urgent need for not only replacing that, but somebody made a mention our inability for deriving scale. I mean, today, if we really create the capacity to manufacture, truly manufacture in India, not only can we service our own requirements, but we can become the global hub of servicing the requirements of many, many other developing countries from here, of that kind of a platform, which will first serve the purposes that we need and then can be taken. And that's where the scale comes in. That's where the leveraging of platform capability comes in. And I think if we pool in our requirements across the Coast Guard, across the public transportation space, cargo transportation space, across commercial transportation space, we can create and leverage the quantities that will make a business plan justifiable as compared to a very piecemeal, isolated kind of a narrow thinking procurement that hitherto has happened so far in our history. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chakrabarty. Very good points made over there. And taking your last couple of points, very important points that you made. I also did mention, and you did sort of reiterate that bit of pooling our power together, rather than a piecemeal things. But it was very interesting to hear about the financial engagement model, which is existing elsewhere, and so that we can leapfrog our availabilities to the defense forces from day one. You said that's something that, if you will permit, I'll engage with you separately to know a little more of how we can apply that to ourselves.
Would be more than happy to do that, General.
Right. I will. I'll get in touch. We can get in touch later. Also, a very interesting point you made. Like Mr. Dhingra spoke about leveraging the defense offsets or fast tracking them as once to ameliorate our issues that we are likely to have after COVID. Similarly, you made a very nice point about the DPSUs have a lot of technology which should be harnessed. There's a tremendous pool which has not been exploited fully. I mean, not your words, mine, but I think this is what you said, that there is a lot of scope to unleash, is the word you used. So I think that's a very interesting point. But for both of these, especially the first one, the financial engagement model, we will have to go back to what Mr. Mohan Kumar said. I've been saying that for a long time. We need reformation, not just para-wise, improvement of the DPP, and which is true. That is required. If I'm putting military terms, that is required at a tactical level, but at a strategic and a higher level of the country, we need some reformation models. So thank you very much for the thought. And now I think the last speaker is, I will call upon Mr. Jagmohan, Regional Director of Lockheed Martin for India, Sri Lanka, Maldives. I hope I have got that right. Mr. Jagmohan, over to you. We are already out of time, ahead of time. So I think I don't need to say anything more to you, having made that remark. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Jagmohan.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you, GCTC, for giving the opportunity to speak to you. Firstly, I think as far as modernization needs of the military are concerned, everybody has mentioned about that, and there's no denying the fact that military modernization is must and will be required. The cutting edge technologies are going to be always relevant, whether it is the technology on the platform precision attacks, sensors, weapons, or whatever you call it. And today, the technology on the social media and software are also coming up very quickly and changing the scenarios of conventional warfare as well as unconventional warfare. We are on the technologies and the requirement of modernization. I think every speaker has spoken to a great extent, and I will just look at few challenges which are going to come on post-COVID scenario. Firstly, as Rajesh Dhingra has mentioned, there are going to be budgetary constraints and pressures, and that is going to have a negative impact on the industry, whether it is a private industry or aerospace and defense industry. Secondly, due to the restrictions all around and lockdown conditions, the processing of the cases is also going to be hampering the normal work, and it is going to delay the pending programs which are being worked out. And thirdly, of course, the supply chain disruptions are causing many problems for aerospace and defense industry, and especially the smaller companies, MSMEs, are having going to have a lot of pressures. That is budgetary pressures as well as pressures to continue their operations. So how do we look at the post-COVID situation and make use of the opportunities? To my mind, as the focus is on self-reliance, Make in India, and indigenization, I think this is the right time to realign R&D setup, as most of the speakers have mentioned, whether it is DRDO, R&D, private sector R&D, academia, or I would say co-development programs with the global technology partners. And when we say co-developing those solutions here, which are relevant for India as well as for the global players and global customers, that may help the industry to grow from the place where they are now to the global supply chain scenario. Secondly, if we have to further, as somebody has mentioned, that we cannot start developing the technologies which are already existing in the world, and the best way to go for it is partnership, and partnership with the players who already have technological edge, and this is going to be win-win situation for all. And for that, I think more government intervention is required. Since these technologies, especially the critical technologies, are generally controlled by the foreign governments, it is always better to have the interface of the government and, of course, guidance and to the Indian private industry also to get the benefit of those partnerships. Basically for win-win situation for Indian industry as well as foreign OEMs. Thirdly, within the defense industrial base, it has to be a phase-wise approach for Indian industry to get into the global supply chain. Of course, offsets have been very useful for the time being, but they have to come in small component manufacturing and look at subsystem level manufacturing rather than going straight to the platform manufacturing by Indian private industry, I'm saying. So this is the right time to get them into the global supply chain by more partnership, by producing components in conjunction with the foreign suppliers. As far as Indian assets are concerned, I think DRDO, DPSUs, even private industry has got a lot of available assets. I think there is need for audit of that, or maybe some sort of collective study by somebody to see what is existing in India and what is lacking. Focus on what is existing and how it can be used. There is a lot of underutilization of the equipment and infrastructure which is lying here, and maybe the private industry can get benefit out of that. And post-COVID or now itself, if something holistically could be viewed by Defense Ministry of Defense. now we are looking at major programs which were part of the modernization plans, whether it is under SP model or under normal procurement programs through Make in India or global procurements. There are going to be a lot of perhaps hurdles post-COVID. I think the best way now is to create the enabling environment for the industry, Indian private industry, as well as DPSUs to take the opportunity and develop the systems here. But major challenge lies again in timeliness and uncertainty of the decisions in future. As far as private industry is concerned, funding is also a major concern. So I would say co-development, co-production, and similar type of approaches may be more workable in future, and we should look at that. So, I think that's all from my over to you, General.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jagmohan. You've also emphasized, working together. I mean, in other words, co-development, co-production, etc. So that was very interesting. We really need to perhaps do things together, for which the ground will have to be prepared by the government. There has to be an enthusiastic participation by the private sector as well. Now, I have, we are a little out of time, but I have a very interesting comment from Mr. Deepak Hota. But then before that, I have, before I address your issue, I have another comment. Mr. Krishnan Verma, advisor of advisory board of the GCTC, he also wants to. We will talk about that later. I just want to put it in the open. What Mr. Deepak said, and this is for the three speakers from the private industry, Deepak said that the private sector needs also to change its mindset in looking towards the government for change. There are structural issues, and defense industry has been open to private sector for a long time. It needs to introspect its role in talking about the private sector. PSU bashing is not going to get us anywhere. Now, I just wanted to put that point out. All of you can read in the chat that he's put out. Well, I don't think anyone is getting into PSU bashing. The only point, I think I'll take a clue from what Mr. Jagmohan said in the end. This thought here should be more as to how we can leverage. I recall it was said by the previous speaker, so that we have a lot of good infrastructure, and there are a lot of strengths of the PSU, the public sector. And if it can be infused with better practices and some better technologies from the private sector, it should be a sort of synergetic win-win situation, for which we'll have to go back to reformation. It cannot happen by the present rules of engagement so easily. Having said that,
Can I just clarify that a little further?
I know that you would want to, but can we just hold on, because there are three others. Time permitting. That's why I read that out to put it on record, because we'll get involved. Then obviously, then I'll have to give time to the private sector to respond. So we'll just hold it for some time, please. Mr. Krishnan Verma, please. I mean, we would like to open the floor to Mr. Krishnan Verma, and a very short intervention, sir. Please.
Thank you so much, General Dua. Thank you very much for moderating it so brilliantly. I think there have been a number of very valid points have been put out by many people, and I think you've handled them brilliantly. I'm sorry I missed the Defense Secretary in the morning. I should have asked this question when he was there. I'm just looking at the context. I've been hearing all the speakers. We've been raising a lot of generic issues, the kind of malaise that has been set into the production, into how we use money, how do we farm out, who produces, what do they produce, how do we involve private sector, etc., and many, many such things, which are all very, very important. But I thought the topic today has we are looking at a system in the post-COVID and the kind of problems that we have. And I have something which I like to flag. there is at this point of time when there is a possibility of a cut in the defense budget, there is a possibility that production might get hampered in many areas. Some projects might be set back. We've got to take a very conscious decision, I think, at the defense ministry, whether they have to set up some sort of a monitoring cell. It could be anywhere. It could be the IDS. It could be somewhere else where somebody could actually look at what is happening in each and every project of all different values which are being implemented, and whether there are any kind of impediments in their going. I'm saying this because this is a time when the ecosystem is being challenged. I think the most stressed sector is really the MSMEs. And if any projects are delayed because of bickering, because of interdepartmental differences, or whatever it may be, turf wars, you might like to call it, whatever I like to call it, this impacts on the livelihood of a large number of people who are actually out of that MSME. So I think, honestly, there should be some sort of a cell, if it's not already there, I'm not very aware, who actually is looking at this maybe, in a very, very micro, and I'm really stressing this fact, not at the macro level, but the micro level, each and everything which is under implementation, which projects are, monitor them, see how they are. I think somebody made a point earlier also that, maybe we should have targets, and then somebody should actually look at at a certain period of time. Have we achieved those targets? If we haven't, what's the problem? And I think this is something I wanted to flag, that this is a time where we really need to look back at the project, see the implementation, especially from the point of view of MSMEs, and the fact that if there are delays in the projects being actually implemented and going forward and revenue flowing in, some MSMEs may go under and might hit a lot of many people will be hit on this. This is the short point I wanted to make. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Verma. A very good point you made over there. We were talking of the larger picture and how do we go ahead. But in times of COVID, when people are coming out to help others, so you really brought out a pertinent point. We must keep this in mind because it will affect the livelihoods of a lot of people, and MSMEs, their hand-holding is really required. Thank you so much. Now, I just want to know, let me just see, pull out the chat if there is anybody else who's been wanting to speak, and because that's what Aditya said. Aditya, do you want to come in and tell us, is there anyone else? Please come in on the video or audio.
Well, we have some interventions from Dinesh Singh from TCS.
No, I'll know. As a moderator, allow me to overrule you. Please, okay. Whoever wants to speak must now, not previous, because I have seen previous questions. I've addressed a few, I've touched a few, I've left off a few, but with purpose. But please, who wants to do it now? Please just enter your name and say, I do, or I want a question, I have a comment. Please say that now. Otherwise, I have to go back to Air Marshal Rai. Or maybe, what I'll do is I'll go back to Air Marshal Rai. I did, Air Marshal Ramesh, I said, we'll come back to you. So please, just a couple of minutes intervention, sir, from you while others decide if they want to come in. Is Air Marshal Dinesh here? Okay. Sorry. Is Air Marshal Ramesh here?
Yes, I'm with you.
Sorry. Please, just that moment, Dinesh pinged his name that he wants to come in, so I galti se main bol gaya. Yes, Air Marshal Ramesh, sir, please.
Yeah, on which aspect? About the Air Force heading the project?
Yes, sir. I mean, I made a thing, and I also said, how about taking a product, sometimes, as the Chinese did, where you took a product and thereafter improved it, even if it is, let's say it's not 90%, it is only 90% is meeting your specifications up to a certain level and not fully. While in the meanwhile, I mean, our gap is huge. While in the meanwhile, we are acquiring some Rafale fighters, we'll acquire some more. All that will happen. But for the whole hog, if we take an Indian product and make it happen, and to that, my suggestion was, giving a better user involvement, giving the responsibility and a lot of authority to the air chief to do that. Thank you.
Yes, I will answer it in two ways. Firstly, tell you or speak to you about a reformation that you've been saying. I was in Israel for 3 years as the defense attaché. So why does their system work? Their system works because the defense secretary has all the 3 wings under him: the military, the research and R&D, and the production. So he ties in with all 3 of them and makes sure that the product is produced by the producer to the requirement of the user, since they both serve under him. If that kind of a reform we can do, it will be great. But I wonder if that will happen in our country. We have a separate defense secretary, a secretary production, and R&D all under different heads. Becomes very difficult to coordinate and drive. Once again, going back to Israel, I had an army friend who was a brigadier, and about 6 months before his retirement, he was sent to the industry to interact with them. So he had to gen up on a particular project so that he knew enough to go to the industry after retirement. Now, this is a planned thing. It was planned. He would go into the private industry and steer that particular project. Coming back to user involvement, yes, it is required as of yesterday. It is required to the highest degree. In our context, it is required. And if the user can be given some aspects of financial control and admin control, because at the end of it, these are the issues which mar the involvement of the user. He says something, but he has no control to implement it. As long as he has that authority, like you said yourself, it would be absolutely useful, and it would drive the projects the way we want. But for the Air Force to take over, Air Force is a fighting service. Air Force is not going to go into production and all that. So we can branch off a few of our stalwarts who are well versed with the project requirements towards the industry and steer it there by design. That would be okay. But for the Air Force to take over fully and run this as part of its living, I don't advocate that.
Right. Thank you very much. No, maybe I have not expressed myself well. I did not, your last sentence first. I did not mean that at all. I mean, the Air Force should not run it. I mean, Air Force is a combatant service. Indian Air Force is Indian Air Force. The limited point was, let's take the Navy and the Air Force. Navy is fairly in driving seat in shipbuilding across our country. That happened by Indira Gandhi taking one's interest in getting into this. We had someone telling us why Aviation Commission, Mr. Raju told us, Aviation Commission did not succeed because the Prime Minister is too busy and the Defense Minister said, go to Defense Secretary. That is the same thing. What I was meaning is about the DG Arrow. The DG Arrow is an appointment within the MOD, which coordinates. It's an ex officio appointment. So anyway, we can discuss that later. My idea is only that Air Force as a user plays a more important part, okay, in terms of coordinating what is to be, what is being developed, manufactured, produced, and improved upon product improvement. Yes, giving it enough authority to be able to do it. Posting a few pilots to, HAL has a very capable pilots who test fly their aircraft. That is the tactical level. I'm talking about higher level. But okay, we can discuss that separately. Thank you very much. Since this I left to you, it will require reformation. You rightly said it won't happen by the way of doing things now. All right. Now I'm looking out for somebody as a Dinesh.
Yes.
Air Marshal R.K. Sharma has 4 small points. Sir, and before I come to Dinesh, I'm going to defer to Air Marshal Sharma. Sir, 4 points. I'll request you to just keep it a little brief. Thank you. Can Air Marshal Sharma hear me? Because he mentioned his name in the chat twice, just 2 minutes ago.
I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Yes, you have unmuted now. Yes, sir. Please go ahead. If you heard me, request.
My understanding as a war fighter is pre-COVID or post-COVID, there is not going to be a very large difference in how wars are going to be fought in the future. Definitely, we're not going to fight yesterday's wars tomorrow. And defense services, as a matter of routine, are all looking of how to fight wars tomorrow, except for the fact that budgeting issues and its roll-on effect will be key. Second point is really capability versus threat-based planning. Now, threat-based planning has to do with what the government thinks will be a rather largest geopolitical role in the subcontinent and beyond. And capability-based planning is to do with what monies you will have in the future and how you are going to utilize that to be able to mitigate or nullify or neutralize the threats that you may see. All of it flows down from what the government's assessment is of the national security objectives. So we need to have a document, right, top down from the government to tell us what the national security policies are. And therefore, how do the defense services in the Ministry of Defense goes ahead and for the future. This goes right down to the point of perspective planning. A perspective plan or an integrated perspective plan is of no use if the government does not endorse it. Essentially, endorsement by the government involves also budgeting. Right now, we have a 15-year perspective plan, but there is absolutely no clarity how on year or plan-based 5 years to 10 years to 15 years, what is sort of the budgets that we should have, and therefore acquisitions becomes sort of major. The third point is private sector's involvement. A lot has been said about the private and public partnership model, but the ground reality is somewhat different. There is still a sense in the private sector that the public sector is being protected by the Ministry of Defense. There are a lot of examples out there, and it is happening day in, day out. No doubt, the Ministry of Defense has to also be able to tell the private sector that if you are going to do capital expenditure for defense, then what is it? You have to give them that assurance. No private sector is going to put its money on the table out there unless and until there is assurance, as well as the fact that the public sector are being protected by the Ministry of Defense. And the last point is regarding offsets. Now, in offsets, we do have a say. What is the offset that we get? Yes, we can scrutinize the offset. What is the offset I want, and to whom that offset must go to? We just go by the appendix, and therefore there are a lot of offsets out there that we are getting, which are being forced down, on us, which in the long term, as Vinko Dhingra also said, become meaningless. And if you have accepted an offset, then you have to ensure that it has to be delivered in time. These are the 4 quick points. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to take a couple of researchers because we must do their questions as well before we end. So before I call on Manaswini Vijay Kumar, I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name, Manaswini, and Dinesh. Before that, very briefly, I will give the floor to Mr. Deepak Hota because everyone, even Air Marshal Sharma, also mentioned the private sector, public sector issue earlier. Also, you made this point. So we must give the private sector, I beg your pardon, the public sector side also a chance to give their point of view, which I'm sure we have to learn from each other. And Mr. Hota, if you're still there, will you please make it?
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm very much fair. Please. I just want to point out to this August gathering here that you may recall that we had oil companies which were in the private sector, as Caltex, Burma Shell. Maybe the group here is not aware why they were all nationalized, and thereafter why Indian Oil was formed in the first place. I'm not saying the same thing is going to happen, but history has a habit of repeating itself. In one of the wars, one of the oil companies which was present in the enemy country as well as in India, it is understood that they did not refuel the aircraft. And therefore, of course, the wave of nationalization came and we started nationalizing. I am not somebody who's going to defend the public sectors in the sense that we have structural issues. I think some gentlemen said about Israel, Niti Aayog plays a role in Make in India. Now, today in Ministry of Defense, an order from RFP to bulk production clearance, we all know how long it takes. Now, outcome-based, somebody mentioned about outcome-based. Yes, procedure, transparency, all that is fine. But end of the day, if you look at, say, a company like BEML, the defense orders for equipments in the last 6 years is about 400 crores. And I have capacity to do at least 1,000 crores and I have people there. Now, I'm not in charities business. So therefore, I'm growing, but I'm not growing in defense. I'm growing in metro. I'm growing in mining, where I'm competing against the private sectors. As I said, 90% of all I sell is open competition, which means I'm like a private sector. Now, TCS gentleman, Mr. Dinesh Singh said that something as mundane as metro, we can collaborate. Yes, I will reach out to TCS to work on a mundane thing like metro. And let me assure you, metro is not mundane. And neither is the, TCMS. These are all very exotic things. So we can look at the structural issues. Now, there are structural issues with the public sectors. And if that is not understood, we can never really take off. We have unions of huge sizes, especially if you look at OFB. Now, OFB is not a company which is listed. They get the salary from the Consolidated Fund of India. Whereas in DPSUs which are listed, we get a salary from what we earn. So that is a limited point I wanted to make. And as far as the private sector is concerned, yes, there is a huge amount of opportunity, but I said they need to introspect their performance since the defense industry has opened up. A lot has been done, a lot more needs to be done. We need to collaborate. The whole world market is there. Let's look at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Opa. That's very well put. I just want to say, with one small reference that you made to the oil companies, the difference here, perhaps, is, if you allow me, is that we are looking at the private sector. You are talking of 70s when this happened, where our private industry has grown now to a level that we are looking for. The private sector, the domestic private industry participation. In times of need, that kind of example that you referred to of an oil company not doing this and leading to, in kind of emergency, every private resource in our country can be leveraged. I'm sure you also just made that point. There's a difference between a foreign entities and Indian entities. We leave that there. I don't want to drag my feet on that. But, working together, like you said, is the order of the day. You mentioned about the huge unions that you have. You, sir, today are from one of the PSUs which is doing well. You make your own. I can, for every one BEML, I can point out some names that they are not doing well, both in terms of performances, technologically, money-wise, revenue-wise, etc. That's not the issue. Ordnance factories, 41 of them, they draw their salaries are from the Consolidated Fund of India. That's what makes them so complacent. You want to corporatize them, the unions rise. What is this unions rising? Tell me, I mean, as a discussion. I know the pressure, the politics, the issues, dynamics involved. But today, when you ask a man to, basically, in simple terms, you are asking that man to be accountable for the work output that he does, and with better technologies. So they rise up in unions. There are political issues. We understand. It won't happen so easily. You said 3 years for you. It won't happen so easily. That is our dynamic. But that should not prevent us from trying to see for ourselves clearly what is the way forward. How much we can do or not do is different. Besides the point, it took us 70 years. It took us 50 years to decide that we need integration in armed forces. There also, we took a weak decision. We did not have a CDS. A bold leadership will come. A CDS was appointed. We will have teething troubles, but we will go ahead from there. That's the point I wish to make. We are here to look at what should be done, not what can't be done. Thank you very much. Now, allow me to go to Manaswini before I come to Dinesh. I just want to give one to a researcher, please. I hope I have the name right.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Sir,
please do go ahead. Yeah, I have interacted
yes,
with
sir.
you on email also, but I just go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, sir. You pronounced my name probably the best that anyone has pronounced so far.
Thank you.
So.
Good.
Thank you, sir. Okay. My respects to the entire esteemed panel. Of course, I couldn't come in when Ajay Kumar sir left, but my respects to the entire panel. It's been an honor and a privilege to hear all of you. I have a couple of questions. I'll make them very short, Dua sir. My first question is really related to aerospace. I don't know who exactly will be able to maybe.
You go ahead. You make the question. I'll do that.
All right, sir. So my first question is related to aerospace and really the ethicality behind the usage of drones. Earlier on in the discussion, in the very initial stages, we talked about the use of drones as surveillance weapons and how they're going to be a very crucial part of future warfare. Now, I just want to raise a point of ethicality here. While we must have advanced technology in terms of deterrence, similar to our adversaries, it is, however, a matter of ethical concern that there is somebody up in the air shooting targets down below, and despite the fact that collateral damage has been reduced a great deal, and the specificity of the target has been made much more accurate, there are still concerns with regard to really how moral is it to to surveil somebody, to shoot down somebody, or to look upon somebody from above in contested airspace.
Okay. Thank you. So is that the question you had, Manaswini?
Yes, sir, that is.
Yeah. If you permit, allow me, I will take on your question.
Sure,
because
sir.
it is not so much to do with the defense modernization. You are talking of another. It's an HR aspect to it, human rights aspect, and the other non-military aspect of it. In a way, I mean, we are looking at how to modernize our forces. You yourself said with the UAVs, what happens is that with the drones, as they're called world over, we, with better precision in both in terms of munition and flying, we are able to minimize, not totally preclude collateral damage, and that's what is the advanced forces around the world are doing. But your point is well taken. But that collateral damage, Manaswini, we will have with Rafale and with a Tejas also. So I don't think there is any getting away from an aerial platform. With precision weapons, we won't be able to do. We won't have collateral damage. Balakot, it was bang on those three structures that we wanted it. So which is so nice. Your point, if you will permit, is a little away from our modernization. We can, you and I, we are. Sorry. All right. Thank you, Manaswini. Does that satisfy you? You can actually talk. We can talk, interact later on this. All right.
General, can I just add a point, if you may allow me? Just a quick, short point.
Who's that, please?
This is Tanmoy here.
Tanmoy
Chakrabarti here. We run
yes,
a very intricate aerospace UAV line of business. And I just wanted to respond to Manaswini is that, in the lockdown period or during COVID, I went through 36 episodes of Fauda. And I encourage everybody on this panel to look at that 36 episode serial called Fauda. It is about counterterrorism in Israel. And the technology dependency and the technology catalytic use of technology towards achieving intelligence and counterterrorism outcomes. It's a tremendous lesson as to what is the way in which technology, especially drone technology, can assist in the ground forces and supplement their tasks and minimize their tasks to zero in on exactly what people are after. And as they say that for purposes of self-defense and for purposes of offense in terms of war, there is a fine line that has to be chosen between ethics, morality, and the defense of the nation. So I just leave it at this, but must encourage Manaswini, in case she hasn't seen Fauda, to look at it, 36 episodes of it. And also, I just want to take half a minute to mourn the death today of Army Colonel and Major and 5 of his team members today in Jammu Kashmir, who have lost their lives on account of an encounter. Much of it could have probably been avoided if he had the ability to have drone technology to zero in on the enemy who were sitting within the country. So I'll just leave it with these 2 comments.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chakrabarti, for that very useful insight. And hopefully we'll get time to see that thing as well, because you're right. Those things are very interesting to watch and learn. My last, I'm going to call upon, it just says Dinesh. Is that Commander Dinesh from TCS?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, all right. Good to see. I can't see you. I don't think you're on a video, but please go ahead. Ask your question.
Sir. So first I'll tell to Mr. Hota that no offense was meant, sir. See, generally defense technologies, and like you are also a DPSU, we generally tend to think that defense systems are more complex. So we think that any defense company doing something in non-defense area is generally going in a non-core business. It was not said in anything else. So my apologies. And second thing I tell you, as my boss in TCS, who's ex-BHL, always tells me that Dinesh, don't think that, technology is only that you guys do. In F-35, the number of lines of code is much lesser than what's there in a connected car. And actually, it was challenged. I went and Googled it, and he was right. So there are definitely a lot of, like, say, things which go even, and I'm sure even in Metro and TCMS or something. But having done even, like, say, a control system of, if I'll say in this panel, even of a nuclear submarine, I'm sure please get in touch with me or Mr. Tanmay Chakravarti. We'll be able to solve your problem. Second point, sir, General Dua has already mentioned about that, like, say, Navy's involvement. So I'll not touch upon that. I spent out of Navy's career of 20 years, I spent about 11 years in WESI, which stands for Weapons and Electronic System Engineering Establishment. And my most of work has been primarily in aviation side, where I can assure you I get undue credit for succeeding in that project, but the maximum credit should go to one aviation observer who was there, part of my team. And he guided us all along. And but for his involvement, we wouldn't have succeeded. It's equivalent to, like, say, there was a Link 11 and Link 16, etc., that US is selling us 1/10 of cost. We made it. We transferred technology to Bharat Electronics, and third generational product is already coming out in the market. So I'll come back to only the points, sir, which I made to Defense Secretary also, sir. When you come to software, sir, like he himself pointed out, that 1 to 2 billion is 1.5 to 2 billion is basically export of Indian IT companies in pure aerospace and defense software outside. And if I can surmise this, even for Bharat Electronics, which I follow very, very closely, and HAL, their total output in this thing will not be more than 100 billion. I'm talking of pure software. So I am not like this thing. The software generally is seen as, ERP, HRMS, inventory management, those kinds of things. I'm not talking of that software. I'm talking about embedded engineering, CAD/CAM, PLM, that kind of software, which is basically engineering services software. That's one I'm sure we can definitely utilize in PSUs or other things, because that's the area which is open even in offsets for 20% cap. And another thing, sir, which is very, again, I'll use the word like very commonplace. I mean, if we think that BOSS is a good OS, standardize it, mandate it across this. CIDS perhaps can take a lead on this. They can ensure that BOSS comes. You can use companies like us. You can make all, like, say, device driver, all case tools, Office suite. We can go kind of model which DevSec was suggesting, that engage these companies, let them look after all upgrades, support for 20 years, 30 years, something. I mean, that's an area which is very quick takeoff, which can be done with this. I mean, this is our largest industry, which has grown without much of government support, only through export orders. So you have a model, why not utilize it? And as it is, we are seeing, I'll go back to same F-35 and connected car program, or like, say, TCMS, which Mr. Hota mentioned. The software element, and especially the firmware element, which is giving the cutting edge to most of the defense systems these days. So utilize this, and this will give you a much better leverage than, like, say, other ways. Thanks.
Thank you, Dinesh. Thank you very much. While you are right, if you remember, even Defense Secretary mentioned that, I think, if I remember correctly, he said $1.5 billion worth of export happening, but Indian software exports that much to the aerospace industry worldwide, right. While we are not able to leverage that. And linking that with what you said, he also said we require a different partnership model, etc. See, the problem is that these things, today we recognize you when we are talking as a matter of discussion. TCS is doing well and XYZ is doing well. But my point is this. Tomorrow, when you float an RFP, and now I'm going to support what Mr. Hota said in a different, like he said, there are structures and there are issues. The moment we put out an RFP, there will be so many operators, there'll be so many fly-by-night, there'll be somebody who will tie up with some foreign OEM, and then it will be very difficult to then necessarily award it to the best. So the point being made here, we have to recognize reformation. This totally getting tied down by the DPP model is cutting our feet. We decided after Tehelka, we are cutting our nose to spite our face. That's the blunt statement I wish to make. My point is that we have to have that reformation at higher level, while we continue to do, when we deal with a tender a project, a file scheme moving, we can then get down to the DPP models. But we need something bigger, better. Otherwise, this way, we are not going to move. We take 5 to 7 years is a very good project. We take 15 years for something to materialize. The technology is gone old by then. There are many people to be blamed, including services in between. But the fact is that what you suggest, there are so many other angles to it. Okay. Thank you. Having made that, now I have one.
General Dua, sir, just 1 minute. Sir, you have already decided to engage with Mr. Tanmay Chakravarti, who was my boss in TCS in 2006, 7, 8, and he's the biggest practitioner of this, I'll say, the engagement models. I'm sure when you discuss with him, Tanmay will be able to suggest you many ways to engage, regardless of RFP and whatsoever said. He's the best expert in this country.
Thank you. Thank you for reinforcing. I have confessed my ignorance. I wish to learn about that. And I have just asked him openly in public that I will engage with you. And Mr. Chakravarti has agreed. And thank you so much for sort of reinforcing that what I'm doing is that. Thank you. Let's hope we need to learn from each other. Okay. Now I'm going to, we are totally out of time. There is one person I have to ask. The message comes to me on phone saying, okay, that is Group Captain Jitendra Gavankar from Adani. Are you there and you wish to ask a question or make an intervention? Hello. Are you on a video? Is Captain Jitendra Gavankar? I hope I've got the name right.
Sir, I guess he's not there, so maybe we can go for the closing comments.
All right. Now, I will give closing comments. Before that, I have one more. This is an indulgence I'm going to make. One quick question I'm going to again give to Manaswini. For one reason, because what she asked was out. She says, now I have a very pertinent point, and I must let everyone know she's the one who's been throwing mails to me and coordinating, so we must give her this little benefit. Manaswini, we'll allow you this question. And gentlemen, after that, all the speakers can make a closing point, but you have to limit it to a minute to minute and a half. So please do that. I will then raise my hand and finger after that if someone exceeds the time. Just a minute. I will. So one sec. Yeah. Now there is one Rahul Banerjee. Am I right? Rahul Banerjee also?
Yes, sir.
He is an assistant. Okay, Manaswini, before you, Rahul Banerjee, very quickly.
Yeah, hi, sir.
Questions after that.
Yeah. Sir, my question is, what is the alternative solution of the conferencing call that is inbuilt for conference and other cyber securities? Just like there are many applications used in conferencing call, just like Zoom.com and other applications, but in a data center outside of India, it's a major problem, I think. So should I use the alternative options to these applications? Or
sorry, go ahead. I thought you finished.
Should I use alternative option to this application? Otherwise, we have loss of data. We have loss of data in India. It's a data security. It's about a data security.
Okay. Thank you. A very pertinent point, Rahul. He is with the GCTC, so you are helping us put these things together, perhaps. I will, okay, let me defer to Dinesh. You are the software guy here. So if you can answer us. But before that, just let me, with the experience that I have gained in last 40 days, I'm not totally non-technical, but with various forums and such seminars or meetings or panel discussions, webinars. I gather that Zoom, etc., are fraught with digital security issues, but Google so far is secure, and that's the impression I have checked and rechecked it out. Otherwise, I'll defer to Dinesh to give us any quick this thing. We don't require solutions, but I mean your expertise will help. Please go ahead, Dinesh.
So my coursemate is there, part of Technology Rising Council, and they are running a program right now, Commander Anurag Vibhuti, and I think they have come up with 4 or 5 products already there, which are under evaluation. So I'm sure soon they'll be coming out as this. I can tell you as a company, we generally use, we don't use this in Zoom, etc. We are on Microsoft Meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, Microsoft Team is another
that's
good
what we are using.
that works, but we're still not sure. It's security. I don't know. You can comment on that. The Indian, what you said, they have come out. There is one video which is on a Nick or video is perhaps not on Nick. There is one more. I'm forgetting the name. Two of them, the Indian applications, but there are glitches. I mean, I have tried that. We run into issues over there. While security may be okay, the servers are domestic. Geographically, but there are issues. Is my issue. You can't really talk the way you and I are talking. So I'll leave it there. Thank you for your question. And lastly, Manaswini, please go ahead. Like a pertinent question, more to the point. You said. Please go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. I had another question of strategic relevance, but I'll stick to the one that's very, very pertinent to the topic that we're discussing today. I have to credit Mr. Rahul Banerjee from GCTC for planting this idea in my head while we were preparing the concept note. And this is really a question about the interoperability of the different systems and equipment that we have, that we obtain from foreign procurement, in the sense that there is a need to diversify our procurement bases, both strategically as well as in terms of just being advanced in our technology procurements. And however, Rahul Banerjee had mentioned to me that there is a certain incompatibility between certain Israeli missiles and American systems, or perhaps Russian systems and Israeli missiles. So my question really is about that. How do we go about diversifying our procurement base for equipment from different countries? And what are the issues of interoperability and consistency that arise there?
All right. To save time and even otherwise, please allow me to take this question, Manaswini. Is there anyone else who would like to come in?
So I can take up. I was there for 10 years in West East, 11 years. Dinesh years.
Who?
Commander Dinesh Singh years.
Yeah. Okay. Dinesh, you go ahead.
Yes, sir. Sir, I'll just take, sir. VESI was set up in 1978 by Navy when they wanted to go for Godavari class frigates, which was basically otherwise known as broad beam leander. It's got a combat management system from Italy, aircraft from Britain, a retraction gear from France, data bus from US, radars of Netherlands, weapons of this in Russia's. And this was done at the height of Cold War in 78, 17, and 80, sir. When Russian used to walk in the ship, he did not even look up because he said, "You'll tell me I'm copying FMC's data bus."
Yes.
So this organization was set up at Navy at that time, then by a Captain J.D. Bakshi, who later became a CMD of Bharat Electronics and also commanded a Tata company later. So similar experience we had when we were designing data links. Now I had a solution. I had to build, let's say, a British helicopter's data to a Russian Kamuk 31 data. So what we did was we formatted, like say, we kept control of, like say, encryption, decryption. We kept control of data format. We completed off the radio. These are not very unmanageable solutions. If somebody asks me, they can reach me offline. I can tell you it cannot. But procurement side, you will not be able to control, but other side, you can very easily control.
Right. Very well put. So, we have to become very smart aggregators. And you said it very right. Let me tell you, VESI is doing a great job. I've had 2 years of association with them when we did the DITTC. Commodore, the sick gentleman, I forget his name.
Javanda, sir. Now he's Admiral Javanda. He's heading it, sir.
Yeah, Admiral Javanda. So, he's heading it. So, VESI is doing a good job. We need such like things. And there was something brought up in between. I'll take an analogy. We said that the DPSUs must act as aggregators. This is what we need to do. We need to model ourselves, learn from best practices, and we'll really be able to do it. I'm shifting from Manaswini's to from there. I'm taking on to what we can do if we aggregate well and smartly. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. And now I'm going to.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Manaswini. Now I'm going to ask everyone all the speakers who've spoken earlier to please share their thoughts, the final comments in 90 seconds. Now, I know I'm putting a tight timeline, so let's see how cryptic you can get. And let's do a Twitter talk. Okay, Mr. Mohan Kumar. Mr. Mohan Kumar, sir, are you there?
Sir, your mic is on mute, sir.
No, my mic is not on mute. Can you hear me?
No, Mohan Kumar, sir.
Okay. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
yes, we can.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much. I've been listening to whatever people have been saying. I should also compliment General Dua for his very competent moderation. In fact, I have participated in several seminars like this. So when we start with all these issues relating to modernization, we generally tend to get into specifics. And then that, of course, ultimately brings to light, a certain type of incremental thinking that we have. Now, this is also very true of the Ministry of Defense, because all other government institutions, because you generally think incrementally and not transformationally. Now, what we really need in this country is like a very transformational type of thinking and action. Now, reforms, as I mentioned in the beginning, have been very slow in moving forward, and there is a lot of reluctance on the part of the leadership, to take up defense reforms. One of the things, which I would like to mention here is that, the modernization is very heavily dependent on the long-term integrated perspective plans of the services. And these plans are somehow, very ambitiously built without any linkage to the budget. And they flounder because there is not sufficient money to provide. Now, it's very relevant to mention here that the Finance Commission, the latest Finance Commission, the 16th, they were asked to consider how we can have some kind of a non-lapsable funding for defense. And my understanding is that the Finance Commission has rather considered it positively, and so that funds could be rolled over as far as defense is concerned whenever there is unspent money left. But then the point is that many a time we don't have unspent money, but most of the money gets cut. Now, if this happens and we have a 15-year perspective in developing technology and modernization, I think it will do a lot of good to the services, because we'll have a sufficient time to roll out the plans and then implement them sufficiently. The next point is, of course, there was some mention about the public sector undertakings, sharing their know-how. The finest example of that is, of course, it is yet to come, but we can still make an example of it. Is the advanced light helicopter and the light combat aircraft, for which the HAL already has capacities, technical capacity to build, but the point is that they will not be able to scale it up. Now, if you look at the Air Force's requirement, scaling up is badly required, and you need a very fast production. And one of the ways in which the public sector can show the way is to license these products to the private sector, so that the ecosystem is suddenly built, and once it goes to the private sector, there'll be additional innovations coming and all the upgradations and other things which automatically move in. Because I have a lot of faith in the private sector's capacity to innovate and bring in technology. And this is sorely lacking as far as the public sector is concerned. So there are a lot of other things that we can do. But my basic question here is reform, and the reform has to be transformational, and we should stop our incremental thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are very good points made. License production to the private sector, especially where the scaling up is required, and is really a good way forward. And we've been discussing this for some time, but no one is really moving forward. And you made a very good point, the spring in the tail, when you said that actually license production that will also improve. We'll get into product improvement once we start doing that. Thank you very much. So Admiral Sinha has left. I know he's messaged me. Mr. Deepak Hota and Air Marshal Rai have already spoken. Do you still wish to take a 1 minute swipe, sir, Mr. Deepak Hota?
Yeah, I would just like to give a 1 minute take.
Yes,
We see consistency of orders. As Mohan Kumarji said, there has to be an overall paradigm shift, orbit shifting, restructuring. We cannot just look at minute details. Unless we are going to do that, we are actually setting up ourselves for failure. And by the way, in your note, you said DPSUs are debt laden. That is not factually correct. Post-COVID nature is going to become more and more important. And I think one serendipitous discovery for us is working from home, which is really going to help us, which was earlier in private sector. We, at least in BEML, you know, I was hearing you with interest. We have got Microsoft Teams. We started off with Zoom. We are in Google Duo. We are Google Teams. You know, suddenly the digital literacy of people, when there is a requirement that you have to jump into the deep end of the swimming pool, I think that augurs well. I would like to thank GCTC for organizing this. And I think it'd be very good if a kind of a set of action points could be sent to us so that, you know, we can take it forward. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Ota. You've already made that point as well. So thank you. I'm not privy to that, but I think if there is some kind of a remark that has been slipped in, been sort of overlooked, I apologize. Next, Air Marshal Ramesh Rai, sir. Would you?
Yeah, just for a minute.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to say that post-COVID, the modernization will depend on the aftermath and how it fans out on us. The point that I want to make is that I see there's no change in any threat post-COVID, but definitely I do see that warfare will skew towards more utilization of the air, cyber, and the space domains. So while talking about all aspects of filling in the gaps in a military, we must not forget this skew, which to my mind is very relevant and is going to happen. So our take on these three domains and developing them and merging them together should be very much there as part of the modernization prospect, so that we are integrated by the virtue of being together in a net-centric kind of an atmosphere or system. Because it is easy to say net-centric war, but I want to tell you that the Americans started their net-centricity in 1960s, and till today they are not very confident whether they are fighting a net-centric war very appropriately. And that should not be the case with us. We can't take another 100 years. So I just want to leave that thought in everybody's mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very, very well said, especially the last point. So we can't go on stretching indefinitely. Maybe we should take an leave out of that, their progress, or I won't say lack of it, but I mean, we can learn some good lessons out of the American issue that you mentioned. And since we are late starters in this, comparatively speaking, thank you. Thank you, sir. Mr. Raju.
Thank you, sir. It's very nice to have all the discussions and the kind of remarks which are made with the panel members. You have everything. We have the capability, we have the capacity along with the public and private sector to meet the requirements of nation and international business systems. But however, as long as the mindset is not changed, this would remain on the discussions and on the papers. Like as General said, as long as the constitutional articles guarantee you the equal rights, the RIP, RFI, RFP, tender, these procedures would make to follow the existing procedures. We may not get any breakthrough, but only the light, what I see is the COVID-19 pandemic, which has shown us the changes in the life and business, like the social distancing. Nobody ever imagined working from home, rationalization of the resources. I hope that this would bring in change, a transformational change in our decision making towards modernizing our defense. Hope things are changing, but we need it to happen at a faster rate. I'm hopeful of the positive things to happen. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raju. On a lighter note, I really don't like you anymore, though we worked together for when we were in service, because you have taken the very sentences that I was going to use in the end. But thank you for reinforcing that thought. You know, you said that correctly. And I think I will still repeat that only when my turn comes in the end, because those are very important points you made. Thank you, sir. Wing Commander Dhingra.
Sir, he has left.
Okay, fine. Mr. Tanmay Chakrabarti, are you here? And you got a chance again, but if you still wish to make a point, or you
just
could
a quick one, General Dua. I think firstly, thank you to GCTC for organizing this roundtable. And I think we should, in the post-COVID environment, one thing that I think all of us have learned is that there is the need for being nimble on your feet. COVID has taught us to really take decisions that are going to have an instant outcome, which I think is the biggest positive fallout of COVID, is that people are going to not wait for things to be seen or felt for long after COVID. I think that's a real psychological impact and is going to put a lot more pressure on government to govern. That's the first takeaway of COVID. The second is, I foresee there is going to be a tremendous amount of withdrawing of nationalism, and people are going to draw more internally, and people are going to wrap around their geographies a lot more closely than ever before because of the dangers of what COVID has taught us. So I see a spurt on a positive side, a spurt of intra-nation thinking, our focus on more self-reliance, and our own, unleashing of our own capabilities, which hitherto have been kind of suppressed because of the easy route of imports, our reduced dependencies on everything foreign, and our, quest to develop things much more cost-effective as well as domestically. And this would provide opportunities for Indian industry as well as the DPSUs in the context of defense, maybe in a much more accelerated way. So I think those are some of the takeaways that I have from the post-COVID experience and the DNA change. Most importantly, hopefully this is a wake-up call for us to change the way in which we as a country are governing ourselves from the 73 years of the way we have come so far. And this should really cascade us and unleash the true potential of India to get us back to the golden age at that India once was. And I think that is the opportunity ahead of the country.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chakrabarti. That was very insightful, very, very well said. Almost flowing out of what Mr. Raju said, you added another dimension to it. And that is the reality that we have to live with. Thank you. And I think the last...
Sir, excuse me, if I could just intervene just for a second, just to apologize for the factual error in the concept note regarding the debt of the public sector units of defense enterprises. I had read an article and Mr. Hota sir had mentioned the error. So I just want to acknowledge the error and take accountability for that. I'm really sorry, sir. I had read somewhere, probably didn't pause to verify it. Kindly excuse that oversight. Thank you, General sir. Thank you, sir.
Nice of you to come up. Manaswini, right? Is that Manaswini?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I recognize your voice. Mr. Hota, any brief remark to her?
No, I just thanked her.
Yeah.
We all make errors, but when we operate from a mindset that PSUs are anyway useless, these things tend to get together. So it's my request that kindly, be assured that PSUs are doing the best under the circumstances. And thank you.
Yes,
thank you.
so
I'm
much.
sure, like the young lady said, and I apologize to you without having known this. I said, this is not at all a representative of the collective of the GCTC. They are young researchers who are putting out things, and nice with their participation. Rahul asked you a question, asked us a question, which are the technological platforms we should go on and things like that. They're learning. There's certainly, I'm sure you also, with your maturity, realize that it is not a representative of GCTC when the thing was put up. Very nice of the young lady to come up and make herself known. The last speaker, if he's here, Mr. Jagmohan Singh from Lockheed Martin.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I think for all the stakeholders who are involved in military modernization, this may be time to ponder and learn from the past experiences and adopt best practices to grow the defense industrial base. As the industry is going through the COVID challenges, I think there is a need to mitigate those challenges by various means, whether it is in the form of budgetary allocations, and holding and helping the industry to stay on track for growing their respective areas. And as far as Lockheed Martin is concerned, we are ready to support Indian industry to deliver suitable solutions to the esteemed customers jointly in partnership with them. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, sir. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Jagmohan. And I think all that remains for me to thank everybody for a very open, frank discussion, but also the fact that a lot of very good points did come out. And I think there's nothing left for me to sort of say in the end. I don't want to have the last word, but if I may just repeat what Mr. Raju and Mr. Tanmay said. Whether it was the Spanish flu or the Hong Kong flu, every major crisis in the world did change things. But this is one so far proving to be likely to be much bigger than what we're talking about. Like World War II changed the world. Today we've heard so many of us speaking about how we are going to change things, how life has changed in just 40 days of quarantine. Things, unimaginable things are happening. So similarly, if we transpolate that to this kind of the post-COVID scenario in our field of discussion, we must be ready to grab the opportunities. We must take that reformation word that Mr. Mohan Kumar spoke about. So we have to do things in a very different manner. For that, we may have to break down the walls. And at the expense of repetition twice or thrice, no marginal thinking will help us to go there. Whether it is the gap in our budget, whether it is the gap in our technology, whether it is the gap in our practices. When I say practices, I'm talking of the public and the private sector. Everything needs to be enmeshed together. And I think Mr. Jagmohan quite rightly said, in the end, he used the word, I remember the sentence, he said, all stakeholders must do it. So I think all stakeholders need to come together in a mission mode, rather than for the mission, for the purpose, rather than stand on this happens in this manner and that should happen in that manner. We need to reinvent ourselves. And I'm sure the leadership, the advisors, the stakeholders will all take part, and we shall have more of such discussions and attitudes. Once again, I thank GCTC, Aditya, and all the team that has been working behind the scenes. We heard only a couple of them. Others have been working. We heard Rahul, Manaswini, and one or two more. But there are others. Thank you all the entire team. And once again, I thank everyone. It's been a long time. I thank you, all of you, from the bottom of my heart for a very, very, very good Sunday. Thank you.
General Dua, can I just take 30 seconds from you, please?
Who's that?
So this is Kaushik here. I have just recently finished my service. I just wanted to request if maybe the next time there is a discussion, if right now we've been discussing modernization as equipment overhaul or equipment upgradation in a lot of industry standards, but maybe if there is a discussion on the integration of the various realms of warfare, including intelligence and information warfare, along with technology modernization, if that could be a discussion, maybe sometime in the future, if there's an opportunity, I would love to be in that. Thank you.
Right. No, I read your remark also, which you made in the chat. But defense modernization was the post of CDA. Okay, fine. You made your point. That's a very different discussion, and we've had one discussion on that kind of topic, and we'll have one more. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Aditya, thank you very much once again. All the best to everyone. Jai Hind.
Well, thank you so much, General Dua sir. I, on behalf of GCTC, would like to thank all the esteemed speakers for their valuable opinions and insights. We believe that it is a high time India's defense modernization process takes a drastic change. We thank Dr. Ajay Kumar for his precious, and GCTC believes with him in the driving seat. The defense infrastructure will, along with the training, will witness heights. GCTC will make sure this type of interactions happen almost every month, and we together bring in the best of the minds, in the industry to the government, and ensure the much needed partnership to modernize our defense capability. We would also like to bring into your kind attention that GCTC is planning to organize a defense and security conference in and around September. We would look forward to your active participation and cooperation in the event, sir. Thank you once again to all. Thank you. Thank you. I will start with Dr. Ajay Kumar, then G. Mohan Kumar, sir, then Admiral Shekhar Sinha, Air Marshal Ramesh Rai, Tanmay Chakravarti, Jagmohan Singh, Wing Commander Dhingra, especially Dr. Deepak Khota, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. And Raju, sir, thank you. Thanks a lot. And yes, none other than General Dua, you did a remarkable job. I mean, it was hats off to you, sir. Hats off to you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Jai Hind. Jai Hind once again.